Thank you for considering Zodiac Attempted Redemption. The story centers around a simple question. What would you do if you discovered one of your relatives was an infamous serial killer? We follow Michael Winsor as he tries to answer that very question when he finds evidence that would suggest he is the grandson of the original Zodiac. To say Michael's life changes is like saying that Category 4 hurricane was a breeze. Navigating his newfound truth, family, girlfriend, and finally job are more than anyone should have to deal with. But while Michael wanted to be good, the Zodiac wouldn't let him. Chapter 1. The Chronicle. The Chronicle was still a relevant voice in the Bay Area, even in a digital world where everyone screamed at once. There was something nostalgic, almost romantic, about a newspaper landing on your doorstep in the morning, folded crisp, smelling like ink and effort. Clara had earned her place here, not just because of her 28 years, but because she had done almost every job within those walls, and a few outside them. She was dependable, versatile, deeply woven into the fabric of the place. The kind of person who knew how to fix the printer, settle an argument, and calm a rookie reporter all before lunch. It hadn't started that way, though. She'd been young, idealistic, and maybe a little naive when she walked through the front doors holding a freshly printed resume and asked to speak with someone about any openings. The receptionist gave her the usual line, "Thank you, we'll pass it along." But Clara didn't leave. She kept talking about her punctuality, her love of learning, and most of all, her passion for the written word. Nancy McSimmons, secretary to the sports editor, happened to be walking by on her way to lunch when she overheard that line, love for the written word. She stopped, introduced herself, walked Clara straight to her boss's office and made the introductions. Then she went to lunch like nothing had happened. Nancy would go on to tell that story for the next 8 years, right up until the day she retired. Now Clara did a little of everything. Her title no longer matters. She had the corner office, the respect of her peers, and the quiet knowledge that her time was winding down. There were younger journalists waiting in the wings, eyes full of fire. She remembered that feeling well. She would make space for them soon. She had plans. A podcast, maybe. A novel. Something meaningful. Travel, perhaps. Rescue a special needs dog or cat from the SPCA. The list was long and getting longer. She was still young, but it was time. Her heart had been telling her for a while. That morning, she was listening to a podcast called Great Women Artists. It wasn't life-changing, but it was pleasant. Her daily routine had become sacred. Arrive early, start the coffee, leave the overhead lights off, and sit in her office with only the soft glow of her laptop while the sun climbed over the skyline. Some days she listened to music, other days a podcast. It depended on her mood. The first hour of her day belonged to her. Then the building would lurch from silence to chaos, and her time would be gone. She was half listening to the podcaster's voice when she noticed the envelope on the corner of her desk. Had it been there the night before? She didn't remember seeing it. The handwriting was messy, below average, but her name and the Chronicle's address were spelled correctly. A faded stamp marked it from Vallejo, California. She smiled faintly. It wasn't unusual. Over the years, she'd made countless friends and contacts in and out of the business. People sent her postcards, articles, and little mementos. It was no secret Clara loved butterflies. Everyone knew it. People sent her everything. Facts, events, stickers, once, even a fossil. She picked up her butterfly-handled letter opener, carefully sliced the top of the envelope, and slid out the folded pages. 2 of them, plain white, standard printer paper. She unfolded the first one and read the line that would change everything. This is the Zodiac speaking. Chapter 2. Michael, 78 days earlier. Michael was counting his blessings. It wasn't something he did often, at least not out loud, but today felt like one of those days. Sunshine, the hum of spring just around the corner, and Nikki leaning against the bumper of the Monte Carlo like a scene from an old movie. They'd grown up in the same little town, knew each other since 3rd grade, had crushes on other people, drifted apart, came back together. It wasn't dramatic. It was just life, unfolding the way it does when you stick around long enough. And somehow, in all the ways that mattered, they'd found their way to each other, She was studying to be a dental assistant, a goal she'd talked about since high school and never once wavered from. Michael had taken a different path, still working through business courses, figuring things out one semester at a time. Today, they were going to visit his grandmother. She'd been at the Carlisle for a few months now, and his parents had been nudging him to go. Nikki had promised they would, so today they would. Michael loved his grandmother, he really did, but he loved his grandfather more. They'd fished together, hunted, rebuilt the Monte Carlo from nothing. When Michael drove it now, it felt like a small piece of that time was still alive. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he could almost hear his grandfather's voice again. Just a word or two. Just enough to confuse the silence. Nikki knew today would be hard, so she stopped at his favorite sub shop. Steak and cheese, cut in half. One sandwich, one soda. Root beer, of course. She worked part-time at a pet store. Her name tag still said trainee, even after 2 years. But everyone there knew she could run the place if they asked her to. Officially, she works mostly with the fish tanks. Unofficially, she did whatever needed to be done. Splurging on that sandwich and soda meant something, and Michael knew it. He didn't say much, but the gesture stayed with him. His parents liked to remind him that he didn't deserve her. Last night had been one of those moments, another guilt trip dressed up as concern. That's when Nikki said it. "We'll go see your grandma tomorrow." Just like that. End of the argument. He didn't care. He loved her. She loved him. The rest would work itself out, right? Just before they left town, Nikki had reminded him about Sunday. "Don't forget we're on for the early service," she'd said. "You promised." "I didn't forget," Michael replied, half smiling. They'd been attending a small non-denominational church together for a few months now. Her idea. A quiet place on the edge of town, where the pastor wore jeans and the music leaned acoustic. Nothing flashy, but it felt right. Michael didn't talk much about what he believed, not even to Nikki, but the calm of it all, the order, the prayers, the hymns, it settled something in him. Sunday was still a few days off, but today he had Nikki, the car, and half a sandwich, and for now, that was enough. Chapter 3, The Ultimatum. The visit with Grandma Winsor went as well as it could have. As they walked up the long front path toward the Carlisle, a modest senior living facility just outside town, Michael couldn't help noticing the cluster of residents gathered outside. One woman fed birds from a little paper cup. Another sat in a wheelchair reading a magazine, sunglasses perched crooked on her nose. 2 older men in matching windbreakers played checkers on a table between them. I'd rather die, Michael thought. Beside him, Nikki smiled as they passed a couple, laughing and sitting on a bench, cardigans draped over their shoulders. I hope we're a cute old couple someday. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh, releasing a wave of faint floral cleaner and freshly polished floors. A soap opera played low on a wall-mounted TV behind the front desk. Someone was vacuuming. The place wasn't fancy, but it was warm, clean, cared for. Grandma Winsor sat in a small chair beside the window in her room, wrapped in a navy shawl. Her white curls were flattened on one side from a nap, and the pink polish on her nails was chipped at the edges. She was thinner than Michael remembered, but her eyes, still a sharp hazel color, lit up when she saw him. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, reaching for his hand. "You've grown even taller. I swear it." Michael smiled. "You say that every time." She laughed, but it caught part way and turned into a cough. Nikki gently stepped in, offering her a sip of water. The dementia had settled into its middle stages, flickers of memory, sudden confusion, moments of startling clarity. Michael did the best he could, smiled, nodded, answered the same questions again and again. He was patient, loving even, but Nikki noticed the tension creeping through him. Later in the car, she asked, "Are you okay?" He didn't answer right away, just stared out the window. Then, it's like she remembers enough to know what she's forgetting. That evening, his parents wanted a full report. The conversation started fine. Then it veered, college, grades, his future, until it landed exactly where he knew it would. "How's the house coming along?" They knew he'd been avoiding the drive past his grandparents' old place. They also knew how hard it had been to say goodbye to the man who'd probably been his best friend, tied with Nikki at this point, and still they reminded him it was his responsibility now. That meant clearing every room, prepping for a garage sale, tossing what couldn't be sold, and sending over a list of needed repairs before they could list the property. They said they'd given him plenty of time. Now the date was set, 2 weeks from today. The estate sale had already been advertised. Their schedules wouldn't allow time to help. It was up to him. Michael could have kept his mouth shut. Should have. Instead, he said, "Oh, but you'll still have time for your weekly TV shows, right? Italian night out, Friday curry, Sunday movie date." Nikki sat in silence as the next act of the family drama unfolded around her. There was no saving the evening. By the end of it, she was helping Michael pack a duffel and a backpack, just enough for a couple of weeks. Together, they made a short drive to his grandparents' house. They parked in the driveway, walked around to the back, and stepped onto the screened-in porch, what Grandma always called the shoe room. It still didn't have a lock. Michael's hands trembled as he slid the key into the door. It wasn't just nerves. The fight with his parents still sat heavy on his chest. In every way that mattered, they'd pushed him out of what he'd once thought of as his house. But something else was simmering too, something darker, a whisper just beneath the surface, a sharp little voice that said, "You don't belong anywhere." Then the door opened, and the scent of his grandparents wrapped around him like a blanket. For a moment, it was exactly what he needed. The house was quiet. A little after 9 p.m., Nikki suggested they do a walkthrough, then decide which room to tackle first. The place wasn't big, but his grandparents had lived full lives and collected plenty of things along the way. Big things, small things, sentimental things, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a cozy den, and the kitchen, by far the most overwhelming, drawers packed with gadgets whose purpose had long been forgotten, cabinets full of mismatched dishes, antique glassware, and knickknacks for days. And then, the narrow door leading to the basement. Michael took Nikki's hand and led her down the steps. It was just a basement, but a surprisingly organized one. Nikki raised her eyebrows. Not because it was clean, his grandparents had always been tidy, but because it felt deliberate. A place for everything, and everything in its place. Labeled boxes lined the walls, Michael's military stuff, Michael's books, wedding. Along the back wall, Grandma Abby's old salon supplies were stacked neatly in a corner, curlers, clippers, old paperwork, all untouched. Michael found a stack of vintage hunting and fishing magazines and wondered briefly if any of them might be worth something. He kept flipping through them, even after Nikki called his name once, then twice. He wasn't rude, he just couldn't stop reading. The articles were full of violent language, dressed up as tradition, clean kill, one-shot drop, how to gut in under 60 seconds. He closed the last one a little too slowly. Meanwhile, Nikki explored a nook behind the stairs, the home decor zone organized by season. She flipped a separate switch. A soft overhead light came on. For a while, they stayed in their own little worlds. Michael flipping through boxes, estimating what might sell online before the yard sale. Nikki admiring decorations, quietly setting aside a few that might make good keepsakes. Eventually, they agreed it was too late to start sorting properly. They'd begin fresh in the morning. As Nikki reached to turn off the light, something caught her eye. Behind the wooden post that held the switch, half wedged between the stud and the wall, was a box. Not a fancy box, not labeled, not meant to be seen. She hesitated. Pest trap? Maybe. But the shape wasn't right. Michael tried to reach, but his hands were too big to fit in the space. So he stood back and watched as Nikki crouched down and slowly eased the box out, inch by inch, until she could tilt it sideways and slide it free. It was a small shoebox, old, dusty. On the top, written in black marker, Christmas ornaments. The box must have been encased by enough packing tape to fill 2 dispensers. Nikki couldn't hide her disappointment. Michael laughed and gave her a gentle pinch. "Sorry if you thought our family fortune was buried behind the light switch in the basement." Chapter 4. She dreamed real. The Glass family had been part of the community for generations, long before Nikki was born. They'd owned the downtown pharmacy for decades until her grandfather passed and the family sold the business. It still carried the family name. Whenever Nikki drove past the building, she pictured herself sitting on her grandfather's lap, giggling as he handed her quarters for the old machine that dispensed tiny plastic balls in all sizes and colors. It made her sad. But Nikki had grown up with sadness and disappointment. Losing her grandfather had only been the beginning. Less than a year later, her grandmother passed too, leaving Nikki and her mom a family of two. She never knew her father. When he found out he was going to be a dad, he enlisted in the military and never came back to town. They'd occasionally see his parents around. Nobody said anything, but it was a small town. Everyone knew. They just pretended not to. Nikki's mother was a proud woman. Nikki had watched her work 2 jobs and still hustle side gigs in the early years just to keep the lights on. Eventually, her mom found her stride in real estate. These days, if she wasn't the top salesperson in the county, she was second. Nikki had seen the hard times. Now she wanted good ones. The easy road would have been real estate. She'd considered it. Her mom pushed it. Nikki had personality, smarts, and connections. She would have done well, but it wasn't what she wanted. From her first visit to a dentist's office, she knew. Something about it just felt right. That was where she wanted to spend her adult days. And when Nikki Glass made up her mind, she rarely changed it. Michael was a lot of work, but she loved him, and work didn't scare her. It never had. So she put in the work, and for the most part, it was paying off. They were a happy couple. He was taking classes. They were making plans, ones that involved living somewhere above ground, preferably outside either of their parents' homes. An affordable wedding in a halfway clean barn with white chairs and round tables, a DJ, some decent food, a couple days at the beach for a honeymoon, a small house with a fenced yard, a kid or two, maybe a dog. That was her dream. Nikki didn't dream MTV big. She dreamed real, and she wasn't afraid to work for it. They'd even started going to church together, a small place on the edge of town with worn pews, warm faces, and music that felt like home. They were going on her suggestion. She was hoping it would stick. Sunday mornings gave her a kind of peace nothing else could, and on the weeks, they went together, holding hands, humming along to hymns. It felt like they were building something bigger, a foundation. Sometimes she caught herself hoping he'd see the older couples 2 rows up, the husband who still held his wife's hand, the couple who shared smiles during the final song, and imagine that kind of future with her. Sometimes she even thought he did. Other times, he'd sit stiff beside her, quiet, still. She could feel it when he tensed, like the whole place was pressing down on him. He never said anything afterward, never complained. But she noticed, and she couldn't help wondering if it was more than just the sermons. Michael came from a good home, a safe one, but love had looked different in their houses. Nikki had learned to hustle for security. Michael never worried. She didn't doubt herself. She just worried that his uncertainty might one day collapse what they were trying to build together. Chapter 5. Trying. The church service was beautiful. Morning sun poured through stained glass, casting slow-moving patches of color across the backs of the pews. Michael and Nikki sat side by side, hands lightly clasped, singing the last verse of Great is Thy Faithfulness. He wasn't the best singer, not by a long shot, but he tried. They always sat toward the back. Nikki's mom preferred front and center, but Nikki had never liked the attention. The pastor's message was about endurance, about keeping faith when life gets hard. Michael found himself more affected by it than he expected. Afterward, they shook hands with the pastor, grabbed a donut and 2 coffees in the fellowship hall. Michael stood by the window as Nikki caught up with one of her old youth group friends. Michael stayed quiet, sipping his drink, watching Nikki laugh. For a moment, he forgot about the house, forgot about school, forgot about his grandfather. All he saw was her, and he was grateful. He watched her face light up with joy so easily, so naturally. He wondered what it would feel like to carry that kind of peace inside, to move through the world without the static, the pressure. For the next few days, Michael stuck to a routine. He got up early, worked on the house, went to class, came back, and worked some more. Nikki had a couple of important exams coming up, so she hadn't been around much. It was messing with him. He found himself irritable. That morning alone, he'd silently cursed 6 different people on his way to campus, and that wasn't like him. Nikki will be back soon. Things would settle. That's what he told himself. At the house, he'd cleared out both spare bedrooms. He hadn't thrown much away, couldn't bring himself to, but he'd made decent progress, staging the garage for the estate sale, swept it clean, laid down tarps, lined things up. He was trying. His parents stopped by one afternoon without calling first. They walked through the house slowly, silently, exchanging those glances he hated, half judgment, half disappointment. At the car, his mom finally broke the silence. "We can see you're trying, son." But before Michael could thank her, his father stepped in. "Michael," he said, "when are you going to realize life requires commitment, not halfway, full commitment to the big things and the small, your coursework, this house, your future?" A shake of his father's head. "At your age, I was already moving up at the firm, saving for a home. I'd bought your mother a ring." He shook his head. "You? I just watched your mom slip you cash. You're not building anything, not in school, not in a career. Find something besides that little girlfriend of yours to be passionate about, something worth your time, something real." Then they left. Michael stood in the driveway, stunned. His chest tightened, each breath shorter than the last. The familiar squeak of brakes cut through the air. Nikki's mom's car, her 2019 Ford Focus, needed work. The slightest touch on the pedal gave a long, whiny squeal. Nikki climbed out, a pizza box in one hand and an overnight bag in the other. Michael's jaw tightened. Dad can kick rocks, he thought. The pizza was cold, the movie was bad, and neither of them felt right sleeping in his grandparents' bed. In hindsight, Michael admitted he hadn't thought that part through. The guest beds were disassembled in the garage. That left the master bed, and something about it felt off, limits. So now he lay on the living room floor, staring at the ceiling, back beginning to ache in that familiar way. The dream came fast, vivid. He was back on the porch, not alone, a presence just outside the frame. Someone brushed a hand through his hair, familiar, loving. That was followed by a sound, a flash, something hitting the floor. He woke with a dry mouth and a knot in his stomach. The next morning, he kissed Nikki goodbye in front of the glass double doors on campus. They were about to split toward their separate classes when the question hit him, clear and sudden. "Where's the key to Grandpa's gun cabinet?" His first class was Ethics in the Workplace. By the time the professor hit slide 6, he'd had enough learning for one day. He drove back to the house, fixed a bowl of cereal, and went straight to the bedroom. The cabinet was still locked. He searched the nightstand, found the key tucked inside an old leather-bound Bible on Grandpa's side. Inside, a modest collection. A few rifles, some shotguns, 2 revolvers, a couple pistols. He'd learned to disassemble his first firearm at 6 years old, a shiny P08 Luger, porch light on. Grandpa's voice calm but firm, repeating every safety rule until they were gospel. Michael had never forgotten. His phone buzzed violently on the nightstand. It startled him. He hadn't realized he was sitting, or that the guns were out. Disassembled, cleaned, laid out in 2 perfect rows on the bed. He had no idea how long he'd been there. He grabbed the phone. Nikki, he apologized, promised he'd be on his way. She called back a minute later. "Don't worry, friend offered to drop me off." Michael didn't think much of it. He stayed seated, eyes drifting over polished metal, tools in memory. A few minutes later, he heard a car pull up outside. One of the front windows was open. He stood, stretched, and walked to the door. When he opened it, there was a moment for his eyes to adjust. A guy was getting out of a late-model Camaro. Nikki was already halfway up the porch steps. "Hey, hun," she said. "This is Steve. He lives a couple houses down from Mom and Dad. Saw I needed a ride, so here we are." Michael smiled, said hi. shook hands, complimented the car, all perfectly normal. Inside, he was a storm. He wasn't the jealous type, and Nikki was the perfect girlfriend. So why did his chest feel tight? Why did his jaw ache from clenching? Why did he feel heat behind his eyes? He thought of the dream, the sound, the presence. Had he been angry then too, or just waiting for a reason to be? Chapter 6. Present day. The letter. Clara had played out every possibility. A hoax, a prank, some inside joke from a bored editor. But what if it wasn't? What if the letter sitting on her desk was real? What if someone connected to the Zodiac killer had written directly to her? The thought made her pulse spike. Still, the question gnawed at her. Why her? The envelope had been placed carefully, deliberately, exactly where she would find it. No one remembered seeing anyone drop it off. That detail clung to her. She'd considered keeping it to herself, maybe not mentioning it at the meeting that was now minutes away. Her instinct told her to wait. Let it simmer. Think it through. And yet, she'd been sitting in that boardroom for years, quietly hoping for one last spark. One story to light up the room, one chance to matter again. Her name had mattered once. Now people barely looked up when she entered a room. This letter, it could change that. She scanned the newsroom, looking for any sign of mischief. No smirks, no side eyes, no hidden camera tucked behind the coffee station. Just a regular Thursday morning. She slipped the letter into her binder, silenced her phone, and walked the 45 steps to the boardroom. The meeting unfolded as expected. Routine updates, weekend assignments, coverage plans that blurred together. Clara technically worked in special projects, but there hadn't been anything special in months. Her updates had become polite nods and variations of all good on my end. Today, something was different. Today, she paused, and the pause lingered. She opened her binder slowly, slid the envelope out, and adjusted her glasses. Well, she said, yes, I believe I do have something of interest, if I may. A few heads lifted. Laptops paused mid-keystroke. This letter was left on my desk, she said, addressed directly to me. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the pages. The room was still, quiet in that way newsrooms only got when something serious was happening. She began to read. This is the Zodiac speaking. I have been busy creating what I will call a redemption story. Not my own, but my relation's. He was not a very nice person, I've come to understand, even though to his family he was wonderful. I will give no more information on the original. That is not my purpose. The squatters who were killed on Franklin Park Circle, that was the new Zodiac. The drug dealer with the red puffy jacket, the one who hangs around Pew's Market, he will not be found. That was the new Zodiac as well. The city will be rid of some of its problems. To the families hurt by the original, this relation is deeply sorry for your pain and loss. Clara reached into her bag and pulled out a small plastic Ziploc bag. Inside, scraps of what appeared to be blood-stained fabric. She set it gently on the table, steadied her hand. Print this letter in Friday's morning edition to ensure you will be only point of contact. Signed, Z. It was Thursday, 9:18 a.m. One of the senior editors stood, walked to the door, and without a word, closed it. Chapter 7. The Estate Sale. Nikki and Michael moved like machines those last 2 days. No time for small talk or breaks, just pricing, arranging, cleaning. It mattered to Michael that everything looked perfect by Saturday at 9 a.m., so it mattered to Nikki too. But they weren't machines. By Friday night at 11:30, the couple collapsed on the living room floor with cold pizza and aching backs. Nikki's mom had bought them an air mattress, and it felt like the most luxurious gift in the world. Michael promised he'd find a way to repay her someday. She just smiled. Saturday, 8:30 a.m. Michael Winsor II and Francesca arrived like critics on opening night. They didn't say much at first, just wandered through the house with hands behind their backs, nodding slowly like they were appraising artwork instead of a life being packed up and sold off. By 8:40 a.m., the first potential customers arrived. A woman leaned out her window and asked if it was too early to come up. Nikki smiled. No, of course not. 20 minutes later, that same woman tried to buy 3 $2 pillows with a $100 bill. Nikki, ever sweet, directed her to the bank around the corner. Michael, ever Michael, silently called her 6 different names and wished her a minor car accident on the way. Just a fender bender, nothing fatal. The next couple of hours, people haggled over flower pots, coat racks, mismatched end tables. Michael played traffic cop more than once, waving arms and barking out warnings to avoid scraped bumpers. But things were selling. His parents even looked satisfied, or at least as close to being satisfied as they ever got. Around 11, the couple returned. They'd walked through earlier with Nikki, curious, polite. Now they were coming back down the sidewalk smiling, holding hands like teenagers. They'd fallen in love with the place. Turns out they'd driven straight to the realtor's office after their first visit and put down a deposit on the house. Both were retiring soon, 20 years with the state of Washington. Their son and daughter-in-law had just moved nearby. Michael's parents were visibly pleased and visibly trying not to show it. The couple had a question. They wouldn't be able to move in for 6 months, not until retirement officially kicked in. They wondered if Michael and Nikki would consider staying in the house in the meantime, rent-free, just to keep it from sitting empty. They even offered to buy a bed for the spare room. Nikki declined the bed, but said yes to the rest. The living room would be fine. They'd be happy to keep an eye on the place, coordinate any work, and handle deliveries. Michael loved it. One, he had a place to stay, but maybe even more important, his dad hated it. And that was the cherry on top. After the last of the customers left, Michael wandered back through the house. He paused in the hallway, staring into the bedroom where his grandfather used to sleep. A sudden chill passed through him, sharp, almost electric. He rubbed his arms, confused. The AC wasn't on, no windows open, just that brief jolt of cold air. Then, for half a second, he thought he heard something, a faint whisper, like breath against the back of his neck. He turned. Nothing, just an old house. He shook it off and kept walking. Chapter 8. Francesca Winsor II and Anita Hendricks. Francesca Rossi had known she wanted to be a social worker from the first week of her undergraduate program. She didn't want power or prestige. She just wanted to help people who needed a hand to make a difference. Then she met Michael Winsor II. He was a year ahead, broad-shouldered, quick-witted, studying accounting. He had a plan, the kind that looked good on paper and even better across a dinner table. The kind of man you could bring home to your mother? Well, if he'd been Italian. But eventually, even that detail was forgiven. By her junior year, she was engaged. A month after graduation, married. California became home. They both found work quickly, Francesca landing a position at the Department of Health and Human Services, where she rose swiftly into management. And there she stayed. She loved the work, loved her team, their mission, supporting children and families across the state. It wasn't just a job. To Francesca, it was sacred. Her assistant, Anita Hendricks, had been there from the beginning. They were work friends, but it had long since grown into something deeper. They didn't do brunch, didn't double date, but they shared prayers, quiet victories, heartbreaks. They knew each other's families, each other's grief. When one of them had a problem, it became shared. And now, it was Anita. Anita had lost her husband to cancer the year before. High school sweethearts. The kind of love you don't start over from. Her family, still in Olympia, about an hour south of Seattle, had begged her to come home. Siblings, cousins, nieces, nephews, all eager to wrap her in comfort and casserole. She had the time off. The department would miss her, yes, but Francesca insisted, "Go, your healing comes first." So, Anita went. Originally, it was supposed to be 2 weeks, then 3. In the end, it was 42 days before she pulled into her driveway. She'd done everything right, stopped the mail, turned off the water, unplugged the electronics, cleaned out the fridge, informed the neighbors, bought timers for the lights. She did everything, but when she returned, there were strangers living in her house. She sat in the driveway, shaking, crying so hard she couldn't see the keypad on her phone. Her fingers found the right numbers by memory alone. Francesca, she whispered. Inside her home were 4 people, strangers, using her things, wearing her slippers, sleeping in her bed. One of them laughed when she walked in. Another threw a glass at her head as she backed out the door. The windows were open. The stench of cigarette smoke spilled into the street with bursts of swearing and laughter. It was a violation too big for words. Anita was appalled, terrified, humiliated. Francesca opened her spare room without hesitation. Anita accepted it with trembling gratitude. And now they were learning the ugly truth. Getting strangers out of your own home is far harder than one could imagine. Chapter 9, The Medicine Cabinet. Michael could not explain what was happening, and if he could, who would he tell? His parents? Right, Nikki maybe, but she was so happy right now. Her courses were going great. She was playing house and loving it. No, for now he was taking this new, whatever it was, on himself. It was nightmares, the internal temper, he called it, the rage he couldn't explain. He feared he wouldn't be able to control it much longer. So far, it was all in his head. Was he going crazy? He didn't think so. He kept telling himself it was stress. He had a lot going on. There were still items in the basement that needed to be dealt with, mostly the home decor stuff Nikki had decided they should keep. She had convinced him it would be nice to mix some of it in with their holiday stuff as a reminder. It was fine with him, but now he had to get it all up the stairs and over to her parents' home until they found a place of their own. He had been at it for an hour or so when the headache pain reached a level too intense to ignore. He went upstairs to see if Nikki had anything lying around he could take. Nothing. Then he remembered the cabinet in his grandparents' bathroom, the only place he hadn't touched. He'd left it for Nikki to sort through. There were so many bottles, he figured some might be worth keeping. The cabinet creaked as he opened it. The glass was warped and clouded, the way bathroom mirrors get after years of steam and scrubbing. The frame had started to rust along the edges, and the interior shelves were chipped and bowed. It smelled faintly of metal and old soap. There were some medications he recognized: Vicodin, OxyContin, Xanax, Valium, and Ambien. Others he couldn't pronounce if he tried. Labels smudged, ink faded. He hesitated before taking the pills. What would Nikki say if she saw this? He popped 2 Valium anyway. Then he went back to the job at hand. That's when he noticed the small shoebox sitting next to the light switch, marked Christmas ornaments. A laugh escaped him when he thought of Nikki and the look on her face after she'd spent all that time finally wedging the box between the posts. Now it sat on the floor next to him. He was over this part of the day. The Valium was making him feel strange, and it hadn't done anything for the headache. He reached for the box. His fingers worked at the first layer of tape, not with intent, more out of idle curiosity. The cardboard was soft with age, its corners sagging. Dust clung to the creases like it had been waiting for anyone to disturb it. Those were his last clear thoughts as his eyelids drooped and his chin dipped toward his chest. A little while later, Michael's surprise. The box was open. He was sitting there, staring down at a stack of old newspaper clippings, their yellowed corners curled like brittle leaves, fragile with time. He picked up the top article. Zodiac reaches out to the press. Zodiac, he thought. The serial killer. He laid it aside. Another, then another. Cryptic headlines, cipher pages, black and white photos that made his skin crawl. Then he found the watch. It was cold in his hand, heavy. It looked like the kind Grandpa wore on hunting trips, but this one had a crude symbol etched into its cracked face. His stomach turned. The cloth came next, dried, stiff, rust-colored. He didn't want to touch it, but he did. Then, blackness. Michael heard Nikki calling his name from the kitchen, then again from the top of the basement stairs. His eyes blinked open to a world half-tilted, like a photograph coming out wrong. Something buzzed in his ears. Maybe it was fear. The box sat open beside him, its contents spilled like an accusation, scattered around him. The articles, the puzzles, the watch, the baggie with torn cloth. Blood. It had to be blood. He scrambled to gather everything, shoved it back in the box with shaking hands. It wouldn't close right. He jammed the lid down and gave it a hard kick across the floor, just as Nicky's footsteps hit the third step from the bottom. He staggered upright. His legs wobbled. Nicky froze halfway down. Michael, what is wrong with you? Do I need to take you to the ER? His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His vision blurred. A low hum filled his ears like rising static. Was that even Valium in the bottle? Chapter 10. Grandpa. Michael Winsor had always wondered why his grandfather never talked about his childhood. Like the early chapters of his life had been blacked out on purpose, sealed behind some invisible door he never intended to open. It wasn't until after the funeral, when Michael began sorting through dusty boxes and yellowed documents, that he started piecing together the outlines of a life too hard to speak aloud. World War II ended in 1945, but for many in Italy, especially in the South, the devastation lingered long after. Cities lay in rubble, families buried their dead and tried to rebuild. While the North began to flicker with signs of economic recovery, the South remained tangled in poverty and grief that reached every alley and hillside. Michael Winsor was born on August 28, 1946, to Hudson and Marita Winsor, their youngest. 3 siblings came before him, a brother Simon and 2 sisters, Paulina and Tootie. The Winsor household belonged to Marita, through and through. Fiercely devout, she ruled with rosary beads in one hand and discipline in the other. A proud Roman Catholic, she demanded unwavering devotion from her husband, her children, and herself. Mass was non-negotiable. Every Sunday, no exceptions. She served as secretary at the church, ran the daycare so other mothers could worship, and volunteered full-time. To her family, it sometimes felt like the church gleaned more of her than they ever did. Hudson Winsor was a man of hands and heart, a furniture builder, a craftsman with quiet ambition. Before the war, his work had begun gaining attention in southern Italy. Beds, desks, dining tables. The Hudson Winsor name was just starting to mean something. Then came the war. The storefront wasn't destroyed, but it may as well have been. Buried under rubble, no customers, no commerce. The momentum he'd built vanished overnight. To support the family, Hudson took a job in a refrigerator factory. Simon joined him there for a time until he enlisted in the Italian Navy. 3 years, almost to the day, after Simon shipped out, Hudson died. Drunk behind the wheel of a 1958 Fiat, a sharp curve, a rock wall. The drinking had started gradually, fed by bitterness and regret, fanned by the weight of expectations and the silence of disappointment. Life had grown smaller, duller, and eventually it broke him. 3 weeks after the funeral, Marita told anyone that would listen she'd had a vision. The Lord, she said, had spoken to her, told her to take her family to America. She told it in the pews, in the streets, at the market, on the town square steps. And somehow, through donations, gifts, and the relentless force of her conviction, Marita Rossi and her children boarded a ship bound for California. It was the beginning of a new life, but not an easier one. It didn't take long for Marita to meet Max Ritter, a pilot out of San Francisco. They never married but lived together until their deaths in a suspicious house fire in 1971. For young Michael, the move to America was a hurricane. He lost his father, then his siblings, who disapproved of Marita's decisions and severed ties. When they left her, they left him too. He was too young to protest. He did what his mother told him. And then came Max. No television, no snacks, no friends over, no bike, no playing outside on Sundays. The house was a prison, dressed up as discipline. The rules were endless, often forgotten, until they were broken. And Michael broke them constantly. Worse, Marita backed Max, stood beside him, defended the rules. To Michael, it felt like losing her too. At 16, he left. He drifted through Southern California, scraping by, sleeping in borrowed corners, working jobs that didn't ask questions, until one day he walked into a recruitment office. The Army offered structure, purpose, a path, and the chance to finish high school. He said yes, and he never went back. Chapter 11, present day, the decision. The senior manager stood, clearing his throat before issuing a warning. Anyone found to have leaked a single word about the letter before its release will be dealt with severely. He meant it. The room went still. Moments later, only Clara and the three senior managers remained. She sat on one side of the long table. They sat on the other. Just how it worked out, but it felt uneven. Clara stayed quiet as they mulled over the letter, its contents, implications, the fallout. She could almost see the gears turning. Action versus inaction, legal consequences, reputation. Finally, the one who'd cleared the room, the same man who issued the warning, stood. He paced, rubbed his hands together, and said, "I don't know what each of you are thinking, but let's start the conversation. At this point, I think we print the letter. Talk me out of it." Clara wasn't going to. She wanted it to be printed. She wanted the world to see it. As the conversation circled the table, one of the senior managers, Hal Bennett, kept fiddling with his pen, tapping, spinning, tapping again. He hadn't said a word since the letter was first read aloud. Finally, Clara noticed his hand trembling slightly. "Hal?" the lead editor prompted. He shifted, looked up like he'd been somewhere else entirely. I covered the '89 copycat. It started with a letter, too." The room went quiet. "I'm not saying don't print it," Hal continued, voice low. "But we need to be honest with ourselves about what this could set in motion." Clara met his eyes. "Maybe it's already in motion." Hal didn't respond, just tapped the pen one more time and looked away. The letter was going to print. Clara was paired with Tabitha Moss, one of the senior writers. Together they crafted the article that would accompany the Zodiac letter. By 11:33 a.m., the story had been submitted to the senior editor. Clara and Tabitha were proud, giddy even. The copy was sharp, thorough, unnerving in just the right way. Clara returned to her desk with a storm of questions swirling in her head. What would this mean for her career? Would it open doors, accelerate her retirement, put her on the national radar? She didn't know, but she liked the idea of change. The next morning, Clara sat at her desk in the dim quiet, lit only by her laptop. She stared at the front page, her article above the fold, her name in bold font. She didn't need to read it again, but she didn't mind staring. She felt proud, though still confused why the letter had come to her, but grateful too. If it had gone to someone else in the newsroom, it would have stung. The phone rang. She jumped, bumping her coffee and sloshing a few drops onto her notes. It rarely rang. She picked it up. "Hello?" Silence. "Hello? Is someone there?" A breath. Then, "This is the Zodiac speaking." Clara froze. Through the glass, the office was still dark. She was alone. The next person wouldn't arrive for another 30 minutes. Again, "This is the Zodiac speaking." Her heart pounding in her chest. Yes. "This is Clara." A pause. "The article is very good, Clara. Well written. Do you think it will stop anyone?" Her mouth went dry. "Well, it would be nice if that were the case, wouldn't it?" A longer pause. "Clara, are you trying to figure out how to record this conversation?" She hesitated, then told the truth. She didn't want to lose him. "Yes." "I'll wait." She fumbled for the app on her phone, hands shaking. The voice, steady, deliberate, had the distortion of a cheap call masking filter, like something a YouTuber might use to prank their followers. It gave the words an unnatural quality, like they were coming from inside a storm. She pressed record. "Okay," she said, "go ahead." Chapter 12. The Box. Michael woke with a damp washcloth on his forehead. He was lying on the air mattress. From the kitchen, he heard Nikki singing. How long had he been out? Long enough to dream, vivid, tangled dreams filled with his grandfather, himself, and the Zodiac, faces, symbols, violence, too much, too sharp, too real to be just dreams. What was happening to him and that damn box? Maybe he should toss it, dump it in the trash, and forget it existed. Probably the smart move, because there was no way his grandfather was the Zodiac killer, right? The Zodiac was a sadistic psychopath, a monster. That wasn't Grandpa. Couldn't be. But then the wave came again, that heat, that crawling rage, moving through him like a virus, leaving something altered behind. Before he could spiral too far, Nikki appeared in the doorway. "Great, you're up." The following evening, Nikki had gone shopping with her mom. He hadn't caught the details. All he'd heard was, "You'll have the house to yourself for a couple of hours." 5 minutes after they left, he was downstairs. The box waited in the shadows, like it had been expecting him. Ordinary looking, cardboard, labeled Christmas ornaments, until it wasn't. He laid everything out, the articles, the ciphers, the stained cloth, the watch. He'd done some reading since that first time, research. The Zodiac had never been caught. There was one decent suspect, but nothing solid, no name, no closure. So, someone else could have been the Zodiac. Could it have been his grandfather? The articles, okay. Anyone could collect those. The ciphers, maybe. But the watch? The bloody cloth? That's where the explanation ended. He knew why the Zodiac would have them. But Grandpa, there was no good answer. Is the Zodiac's blood in my veins? Will this rage take me somewhere I can't come back from? Will I hurt someone I love? Nikki? My parents? He wanted to burn the box, burn the truth. Instead, he packed everything back in, shoved it deep into its hiding place, went to the medicine cabinet, swallowed his third and fourth pill of the day, and stepped out onto the back porch. An hour later, Nikki joined him with Cole's bag on her lap. She found a spring jacket on sale and was thrilled. Michael smiled. If she was happy, he could be too. Even with the pounding in his skull, even with the fire simmering just under his skin, they ate leftovers from the fridge. He dropped her off at work with a promise to pick her up in 4 hours. As he pulled out, his phone buzzed. His mom. Her voice was brittle, like she'd been crying. "Can you stop by?" she asked. He was there in 6 minutes. They sat on the front porch, and she told him what Aunt Anita had told her. He'd always known her as Aunt Anita his entire life. What his mom was saying didn't sound real. Strangers living in her house, throwing glasses, threatening her. In San Francisco, in America. She started talking about legal steps, housing law, civil court. He wasn't listening. His thoughts were dark, chaotic, explosive. He felt like David Banner right before he became the Incredible Hulk. Controlling his thoughts and body movements took everything. His dad was out of town. Michael made sure his mom would be okay, and he left. He didn't want her to see him this way. Then Michael drove downtown. Home felt dangerous. Downtown was better. He used part of the money his mom gave him, ordered a beer, a soft pretzel, watched the game. He liked bars, always had. It was early. Just a few patrons, a couple at the bar, a group playing pool, Michael, alone with the game on the big screen. Then he saw it. Zodiac, spelled across the screen in bold white font. He waved the bartender over. "Mind turning it up?" The man nodded. It was a trailer, a new streaming mini-series about the Zodiac killer. Michael barely breathed. At the bar, one of the men made a comment. He couldn't catch the words, but the other burst out laughing. Then more laughter, joking, mocking. They're making fun of him, Michael thought. Not the show, him. His temples throbbed. It rose in him, the heat, the pressure, the need to defend. Not because he wanted to, because something inside demanded it. He knew the story. The Zodiac was a killer, evil, but something in his blood didn't care. The men paid their tab and stepped outside. Michael had already paid. He pulled his hat low, raised his collar, and followed them out the door. In the alley between the bar and the townhomes, he found a broken piece of fencing. They never saw him coming. Under normal circumstances, they could have taken him apart, but they were tipsy. He got a few good hits in. One of them shouted, the other swung wildly and missed. Michael ran. His chest burned. His knuckles throbbed. He didn't slow down until he reached his car. He sat there, hands shaking on the steering wheel. He waited for guilt. It didn't come. What came was something worse. Relief. Chapter 13. A bonus gone wrong. The following day, Michael couldn't think of anything but the Zodiac. That box, his grandfather. Each looped through his head like a broken record, leaving space for nothing else. Nikki made lunch and insisted they eat on the back porch. The weather was perfect. She was smiling. He was thinking about a serial killer. She'd gotten a small bonus at work, a thank you for resolving a delivery issue, and wanted a new pair of sneakers. He welcomed the distraction without thinking it through. For over an hour, he was surrounded by shoeboxes, every size, every color, every pattern. By the time they left, his stomach churned and his head throbbed. The fresh air helped a little. The Zodiac killed young couples just like us, happy, In love, their whole lives ahead of them, that thought repeated like a curse. Back at the house, he went straight to the medicine cabinet. One bottle wasn't cutting it anymore. Maybe two would, maybe three. He wondered, had his grandfather felt like this, haunted by thoughts until they broke him? He couldn't finish the thought, wasn't ready. Nikki had noticed the shift. She chalked it up to stress, his parents, the house, and grief. If she knew he was digging through his grandparents' old prescriptions, she'd lose it, and she would have every right. Michael didn't want clarity. He wanted just a moment of silence, something to still the rage, the buzzing under his skin, something to make sense of the Zodiac's shadow over his family tree. After dropping Nikki off for her evening shift, he found himself in front of Aunt Anita's old house. He didn't remember driving there. The lights were on, the front door hung open, music blasted from inside, trash littered the yard. The once proud little home looked like it had given up. He went out, circled the house like it belonged to him. Behind the garage door, he found the old baseball bat he'd once left there for Anita's protection. Inside, laughter, voices, a door slam, squatters. The rage boiled in his chest. Trash piled in the backyard. The stench was unbearable. How had no one stopped this? He knew the house, every blind spot, every creak, every exit. He told himself he wasn't going in, but the fire inside didn't ask for permission. From the moment he stepped through the broken screen to the moment he slipped out the front door, maybe 4 minutes, Michael was nothing but motion fueled by fury. 2 men, 2 women. He didn't see people, just problems. The bat didn't discriminate. He walked away without a scratch. 3 days later, he kissed Nikki goodbye and watched her walk into work. Checked the radio clock. 2 hours to himself. The fire was still there. The need. He'd tried every bottle in the cabinet, mixed a few. Nothing worked. But after the squatters, after the violence, he felt peace. Short-lived, but real. For 2 whole days, he was himself again. The Michael Nikki loved. The one she noticed had come back. She smiled more, touched him more, laughed with him again. If killing gave him that peace, was that what his grandfather found too? Was this the why? Or was he just a monster? He didn't know yet, but he knew this. If peace came at a cost, then maybe that's what he'd do. Write his own story, his own redemption, one target at a time, and the voice knew where he should hunt. Present day. Clara fumbled with her iPhone, finally finding the voice recorder app. She'd never used it before, but it was simple enough. The Zodiac waited, just like he said he would. Then he spoke calmly, cold and familiar. She shivered, hit record. This is the Zodiac speaking. The article was very good, well written. Do you think it'll stop anyone? Clara deflected. Let him lead. Do you? She asked. A pause. No. We're flawed, Clara, from top to bottom. Flawed. The Zodiac will be looking for opportunities. It's important those with the most flaws know this. It will be fate, their fate. Another pause. Do you like games, Clara? No. Not really, if I'm being honest. Good. Me neither. So let's be honest with each other. I'll go first. I'll be visiting the Mission District. Clara's throat tightened. Now your turn. Do you believe I'm related to the real Zodiac? She hesitated, then whispered, Yes, I believe you. Then the line went dead. Chapter 14, The Mission District. The Mission District had something for everyone. Trendy restaurants, cozy bed and breakfasts, boutique shops, and craft cocktail lounges, and of course, Mission Dolores Park. Murals climbed the walls in bursts of color, a patchwork of street art that turned alleyways into galleries. Bright strokes, sharp angles, a kaleidoscope of local history, but after darkness, the mood shifted. Some corners lost their charm, slipping on the scale towards what most would call seedy. The authorities knew those corners well. They had eyes on every block. If the Zodiac went there, they'd catch him. Michael knew this. He had no intention of being anywhere near the Mission District that night, but he hadn't lied to Clara either. He had visited, briefly. Then he followed his targets across the bridge to Oakland. There were 6 of them, dealers, not the kind with puffy jackets and gold chains. These guys were polished, structured, professional, gang-affiliated most likely. Michael didn't need insider knowledge to know that. All it took was a parked car, a pair of eyes, and a working brain. He'd watched them operate, Watch them move cash, watch them leave, watch them return. This was his second night tracking them. He knows their rhythm now. They pooled the money at a house less than 30 minutes from the main strip. Last time, he only stayed for 20 minutes, enough to see 5 different groups of young men enter through the back. This wasn't a street-level hustle. This was organized. Tonight, he waited for the neighborhood to settle, for porch lights to go dark, for traffic to thin, for the shadows to deepen. Fewer cars, fewer eyes, less risks. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood that called the cops. He wasn't sure if he was ready to call himself a criminal yet, but his mind was leaning hard in that direction. At some point, he drifted off. When he woke, it was just past midnight. He sat up, waited 20 more minutes. Then, movement. The screen door creaked open. 3 men stepped outside. 2 were massive, broad, heavy-set, the kind who broke bones for a living. The third was leaner. Each of the bigger men carried a duffel. Cash. Michael processed this new development. 3 targets instead of 6 that he could manage. He counted. 8 seconds. No backup, no shadows, no sound from inside. They walked toward a truck at the corner. Full-sized. New, chrome wheels. Money. Michael stepped from the dark, took position. His finger hovered over the trigger. For half a second, he thought about Nikki, about the box, about how far he'd come and how far he would go. Then he pulled. 3 shots, 3 bodies. It was clean, fast. It had to be. He jogged to the truck and grabbed the bags. His pulse was still pounding when he dropped the duffels in the back seat, hands trembling, not from fear, adrenaline, triumph. He closed the door, exhaled, knowing he needed to get moving. Then his phone buzzed. Nikki. He stared at the screen, a missed call, then a text. "Are you still coming? We're lighting candles in 15 minutes. Pastor was asking about you." Michael winched. The church service he'd forgotten entirely. Late-night prayer for the missionaries the church supported around the world, a monthly event. Nikki always looked forward to it. She'd even bought extra candles, said it helped her feel grounded. He tapped the message open, typed, stopped. What was he supposed to say? That he was too far away? That he'd just shot 3 men in the dark and didn't feel bad about it? His hands hovered over the screen. Then he locked the phone and dropped it on the passenger seat. Outside, the neighborhood kept his secret. Inside, Michael closed his eyes. He could still see the candle-lit sanctuary in his mind, warm, golden, peaceful. He could picture Nikki in the second pew, her face glowing in the flicker. He wondered if their prayers would burn bright enough to reach a man like him. He thought he knew. Chapter 15. Where the Peace Lives. Michael and Nikki slept in. It was 10:15 when the neighbor's dog lost its mind at the mailman. They stayed tangled in the sheets, laughing at the sounds, limbs warm and lazy, like nothing outside their little world could touch them. For the first time in a long while, Michael felt good. Not just okay, good. No headache, no static behind his eyes, and nothing else that clawed at him when he was alone. Nikki had the day off. They'd made a pact, no work talk, no to-do lists, no stress, just the 2 of them. He told her he'd picked up a couple of side jobs with an old friend, some mechanical work, paid cash. That explained the money and the reason he had slept through the candle lighting ceremony. The physical labor had taken more of a toll than he knew. Cash he usually didn't have, lies he usually didn't tell. He'd unpack later. Today wasn't about guilt or gray lines. Today was about brunch, maybe a drink downtown, whatever made her smile. What made her smile was a trendy little place downtown, organic ingredients, waiters in band tees, tables named after dog breeds. One of her coworkers had raved about it. The food was good. The prices made Michael wince. But Nikki took a dozen photos and giggled the whole way through, which meant it was worth every cent. The name of the place looked more like a squiggly line than a word. When Michael pointed that out, she elbowed him gently and said, "Shut up and smile." Afterward, they wandered the shop, lined streets. Window shopping, they agreed. Michael kept telling himself he had enough money to buy her anything she wanted, within reason. But there was a voice in his head reminding him it wasn't his money, it hadn't been earned. If he stopped to think, really think, he could spiral. So, he didn't. He smiled, laughed, held her hand. He wasn't a thief, not by nature, but he hadn't been a killer either. Until now, that was the part that sat quiet and awful inside him. He kept touching his pockets. The money felt hot, like it knew. The couple paused at a street artist's table. She worked at a steady pace, painting a snow-covered cabin nestled in a pine forest, a curl of smoke from the chimney, the soft orange glow of firelight through frosted windows. It felt warm, real, like peace, captured in paint. Nikki leaned into him. "Do you think we'll ever get to do something like that?" Michael smirked. "I mean, I can't paint." She laughed. But that wasn't what she meant, and he knew it. Nikki meant a quiet life, a place of their own, a dog, a porch swing. She meant safety, stability, a future. He wanted to tell her yes, wanted to believe it himself, but part of him knew better. He stared at the painting like it was a door, one he wasn't allowed to step through. His grandfather had been a career military man, respected, structured, disciplined. His father, a suit and tie accountant, dependable, predictable. But Michael had seen through all of it, the clean shirts, the forced smiles, the polished lives that looked good in pictures but hid 1,000 cracks beneath. The world was pretending, faking it. Maybe that was the answer. Pretend hard enough and maybe it becomes real. He had a pocket full of cash. He looked like the perfect boyfriend, out with the perfect girl. But in his head, a voice was screaming, "Monster." Then, softer, the voice of sensibility. "You can fake it. We can help you." Chapter 16. The Detective and the New Zodiac. He'd been watching from afar. Was it too soon? To others, absolutely. To him, not at all. Sean had always been curious about the Zodiac, maybe even a little obsessed. There was a time when newspaper clippings covered the entire dining room table. Jill had threatened to dump a pitcher of water over his head, the articles too. He remembered that moment, missed her even more. And now, someone claiming to be related to the original Zodiac was killing and sending letters to the press. Sean was intrigued, more than intrigued. He was sitting at the gate, boarding pass in hand. In a few hours, he'd be on the ground in California. He'd told Kenny he just needed a few days. It wasn't the first time, probably wouldn't be the last. If he said he missed Jill, it would only be a half-truth. He'd had to be strong for the kids. That's what being a suddenly single parent required. Before she got sick, he would have sworn he could handle anything life threw their way. Turned out, he couldn't. Sean hired help, stayed connected, barely. The grief made it hard to be present. He still felt guilty, still talked to Jill at night. His distraction? Killers, specifically serial killers. So, this new case? Something to chase, something to feel. He booked a long weekend in San Francisco, rented a convertible, wore a Don Johnson-style suit. Too young to know? Look it up. The tank top underneath? Teal. He felt good, like someone new, or maybe someone old finally resurfacing. Therapy helped. He'd worked on himself, trying to soften the sharp edges. He would always love Jill and the children, but he was lonely. All those nights at the office, all those hours buried in crime reports and cold cases. It got old. He was ready to try again. Maybe. A new city might not be the ideal place to start something real, or maybe it was the right place, but his mind kept circling back. The killer. Was it real? A copycat? A legacy? And why Clara? Why the letter? Why now? What made this the moment to resurface? He didn't have the addresses yet, but he would. He needed to walk the neighborhoods, feel the scenes. Did the killer live nearby? Could it be a woman? Unlikely, but he couldn't rule it out. So many questions. He tried to stay awake on the flight, but somewhere over the Rockies, he drifted off, straight into the one place he'd been trying to avoid, the balcony, where Jill took her last breath. She'd looked peaceful. Back then, that image had comforted him. Now, it haunted. A tapping on his shoulder pulled him out of it. He'd been loud. Jill used to tease him about his bad dream noises, but this was a packed flight. Perfect. The guy behind him was about his age, maybe fitter. His wife, gorgeous, kind smile, effortlessly warm. Sean felt a flicker of jealousy, then guilt. He apologized for whatever nonsense he'd muttered. At baggage claim, he tried to avoid them, but they kept popping up. Finally, the man approached. "Sean, this is going to sound weird." he said, but my sister thinks you're a detective or was someone she saw on TV. She's a true crime junkie. Personally, I think she's nuts. Please tell me she's nuts. Sean hesitated, then smiled. Sorry, your sister is right. Her name was Faith Morgan. And yes, she was obsessed. She knew the Miles Humphreys case inside and out, recognized Sean from an old panel event years ago, said he'd been with a woman who clearly wanted to leave. That would have been Jill. Faith's brother shook Sean's hand and said, just get her home safe. Sean half expected a hidden camera crew. Stuff like this didn't happen in real life. They spent 3 hours together, drinks, food, and the kind of conversation that just flowed. They talked about Jill, about Faith's ex, Ryan, kids, life. It felt effortless. By the time he pulled up to her family's driveway, one thought lingered. At the very least, I made a friend. Then she surprised him. Would you like someone who knows the area to show you around while you're in town? Sean didn't even think. A man would be crazy to turn down that offer. Chapter 17. Are you okay? She didn't like getting home late, but Estelle asked. Estelle, who was more sister than friend, needed a prescription picked up. And Clara, exhausted, head spinning, said yes, because that's what Clara did, because some part of her still believed that kindness counted for something, even now, even with the Zodiac in her life. The Mission District story was a dud. There were no killings associated with the Zodiac in the district. The story wouldn't have left the area unless, of course, it involves the relative of the Zodiac. Then it was national, then it mattered, and to make matters worse, the killer hadn't been heard from in days. Her final fleeting 15 minutes. The pressure was mounting. The top brass wanted another story, no excuses, just results. It had been years since Clara felt heat like that, years since a case had gripped her so tightly, and for a while she missed it. Now, be careful what you wish for, that little voice whispered softly. She pulled her SUV into the garage, headlights cutting across the far wall. Then she remembered she hadn't checked the mail. It was almost always junk. Ads, flyers, someone wanting money for their charity or cause, but not today. Today there was none of that. Just one envelope, her name scrawled across the front, jagged letters, no return address, no postage, not even sealed. She didn't remember sitting, but now she was on the curb, envelope in her lap, eyes locked on the ink, the garage door open, the engine cooling behind her, ticking in the quiet. Her phone buzzed, a voicemail. She tapped play, barely listening, until Andrea's voice came through. Hey, just wanted to say we missed you at dinner. Everyone was asking where you were. We'll have to try again soon. Clara closed her eyes. She hadn't just forgotten. It felt bigger than that. A neighbor, jogger's outfit, a golden retriever tugging at the leash. He slowed. Are you okay? Was she? Clara looked up, smiled. Yes, she said softly. Thank you. But the truth? Her truth? Hands shaking, heart beating too fast because the letter was from him, because he knew where she lived. Clara rolled that truth around for a bit before she went into the house. Chapter 18. Out of mind. It was a slippery slope Michael was on. The lack of sleep, hallucinations, voices, all of it managed with whatever expired pills he could find in his dead grandfather's medicine cabinet. Not exactly ideal. He'd nearly flushed the bottles more than once, but letting go wasn't his strong suit, and lately, he'd convinced himself the haunting wasn't just in his head, it was the watch, or the blood-stained cloth, or maybe the unfinished ciphers. Something was haunting him, maybe not haunting, calling. Nikki was at work. Michael was on his way downtown. The plan was simple. Dump the box in one of the alley dumpsters near the bar district, pop a couple of pills, order a beer, maybe a pretzel. He loved pretzels. See if the anxiety, the noise, the static would wash away. It wasn't a great plan, but it was the best one he had. Better than murder, probably. That option would certainly reduce the number of abusive pimps and drug dealers in the area, but he wasn't built for that, he told himself. Repeatedly, he'd considered bringing the money too, tossing it, burning it, letting go. But some part of him believed it had been presented to him, a gift, a message, a challenge, any one of these or all from his grandfather. He hated lying to Nikki, but seeing her happy, that did something to him. For the first time, they could go on real dates, ones that didn't involve splitting a 6-inch sub. Now they have options: meals with silverware, drinks with citrus wedges, a dessert menu she didn't feel guilty opening. It was a lot of money, especially for someone who'd been living off the occasional 20 his mom slipped him like contraband. There was only one area of his life bothering him at the moment. Michael felt disconnected from the Lord's house. It started small, missing a midweek church service here, skipping a prayer night there. Now, the thought of sitting in that pew made him feel like a fraud. So, the night before, he said, "Hey, why don't you go with your parents this Sunday?" Nikki stared at him. "I go with you." "I think it's time," he said. "It might be good for you. And for them." He said it gently, smiling. But he meant it. He didn't want to fight Faith anymore. He didn't want to sit in that sanctuary feeling like something inside him was decaying, and more than anything, he didn't want her to see the cracks beginning to split through him. Nikki took it as if he'd struck her. He wanted to explain, but there were no words that would make this okay. Michael was hopeful that the tension would pass. He needed it to pass. He looked down at the box in his lap. So small, so ordinary. Inside, nightmares. He had this strange thought, absurd and terrifying. What if the box hadn't been hidden to protect someone from finding it? What if it had been waiting for him? The louder of the two voices in his head strongly suggested, "Keep the box. It's important. It's your destiny." And Michael started to believe it. Could fate come in different forms? Had it been waiting for him? Patient? Silent? Maybe it had been circling him all along, through childhood tantrums, through funerals and failures, through every rage-filled silence he'd swallowed whole. Maybe it wasn't madness. Maybe it was an inheritance. Chapter 19, The Woman and the Warning. There was a serial killer in their midst, and if possible, he wanted in. Not just as an observer, as a contributor, which is how he found himself sitting in a stiff wooden chair in a precinct lobby that smelled like old carpet, smoke, and takeout, waiting to speak with someone who probably didn't want to talk. Eventually, a young man with a too short of a tie and a smile a little too bright came out. A few minutes of small talk confirmed it. They didn't have anything. The department was under pressure from upstairs. They were scrambling. He'd seen it before, too many times. Sean offered his help in whatever capacity they'd accept. To the detective's credit, he didn't shut him down. Instead, he walked Sean into a cramped side room off the main corridor. Inside, he handed over the working file. Thin, worn, filled mostly with newspaper clippings and copies of Zodiac letters. Sean's attention caught on a printed transcript. "Is this from the phone call to the Chronicle?" he asked. The detective nodded. "Keep it. We've got copies." 2 minutes later, Sean understood the young man's behavior. The captain walked, flanked by members of his staff. All smiles. He shook Sean's hand firmly and said he was a big fan of the podcast, the book, the Miles Humphreys case. Sean smiled politely. He'd heard that tone before. Praise as a prelude to dismissal. After leaving the precinct, Sean found a bench outside and checked his phone. No missed calls, no texts, nothing from Faith. He tried not to be disappointed. Grab a sandwich, maybe invite her to lunch? He decided against it. Instead, he reopened the file and scanned the notes again. So little to go on. No real pattern yet. Sean kept circling back to Clara. She was the key, and according to the file, she'd barely been questioned. That was a mistake. He opened his rideshare app. The Chronicle office was 10 minutes away. He was about to book the ride when his phone rang. "Hey," Faith said. "Where are you right now?" He gave her the address. "Perfect," she said. "I have someone you'll want to talk to. I can be there in 5. He barely had time to toss his sandwich wrapper and pop a mint before a convertible Lexus pulled up at the curb. Faith was behind the wheel, sunglasses on, hair pulled back, effortlessly beautiful. As they drove, she filled him in. She'd reached out to an old friend, someone with ties to upper management at the Chronicle. It was gambling, but it paid off. Now, she and Sean were on their way to meet Clara St. Cloud. Sean was stunned and grateful. He thanked her. Still, he couldn't help but wonder who this friend was. A boyfriend? An ex? He knew better than to ask, but the question lingered. The coffee shop was winding down from its lunch rush when they arrived. Clara was already seated in the back corner, facing the door. When she spotted them, she stood and offered a warm smile and a hug. Sean hadn't expected that. The women ordered sandwiches. Sean stuck with coffee. Conversation flowed easily at first. Stories about the podcast that had reignited interest in the Miles Humphreys case, the upcoming book deal, even whispers about a movie. Sean couldn't confirm the last one, but he wasn't about to ruin the vibe. Then Clara leaned in, lowering her voice. I got a letter at my home yesterday. Sean couldn't hide his surprise. Faith went still beside him. What kind of letter? Sean asked. Zodiac, Clara said quietly. No stamp, no return address. Just sitting in my mailbox. She reached into her bag without prompting and handed it over. The envelope was worn, edges soft from being handled too many times. Sean examined it, then looked at her. You didn't call the police? Clara shook her head. No, Faith's voice sharpened. Why? Because I needed to decide what to do with it first. A beat of silence. He knows where you live, Sean said. Yes, Clara said, calm, even. She took a slow sip of wine, then set the glass down without flinching. Have you noticed anything strange lately? Sean asked. Anything unusual around the house? Clara looked away, toward the window. There's been a man across the street, she said finally, just standing there a few nights ago. I told myself it was nothing. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because stories don't take shape by accident. You must let them breathe, see where they lead. Faith's eyes narrowed. Sean leaned back slowly. The journalist in front of him wasn't frightened. She was intrigued. Chapter 20. Teach them a lesson. Nikki had mentioned a few days ago that she was going out of town with her family. Michael had forgotten, but now hoped the time apart would ease the tension. His next thought, I have 2 days to do whatever I want. As soon as the realization hit, the voice inside hissed, time to hunt. He hated that voice, hated himself for listening to it. But it always knew how to ease the anger, to dull the pain. The headaches were back sharp, grinding, almost unbearable. The fix was dangerous, but worth the reward. Sean met Clara at her office the next morning. His Airbnb was 20 minutes away. He'd already checked in with Kenny. Work was fine as expected. The team back home was solid. He couldn't lie to Kenny anymore, so he told him everything minus Faith. Kenny had been supportive, even sounded happy for him. He knew part of the struggle, not all of it, but enough. Sean had also checked in with the local authorities and the FBI. He delicately turned over the letter, explaining Clara's panic and distress. Then he met with the senior editorial team at the Chronicle. The paper wanted to run the next story Friday morning. The FBI did not. The FBI believed giving the public too many details could jeopardize the case. Sean agreed. Giving the killer more attention control wouldn't stop the violence. It might amplify it. Michael was confused. He had expected the article, expected the spotlight. His spotlight. Michael had been specific, personal. He gave them pieces to the puzzle, explained to Clara directly what happened in Oakland, explaining that he had been in the Mission District. It was important that Clara believed him, and they printed nothing, not a headline, not a sidebar, like he didn't matter at all. He wasn't just being ignored, he was being erased, and when the world refused to see you, you had to make them look. Michael went to the basement, more pills, sat on the cold floor with the box between his knees, and there he stayed, in the dark, for 3 hours, awake the entire time. At first, he thought he was thinking, planning, but slowly he realized the truth. He was waiting for the voice, and it came 2 hours and 52 minutes into the descent. Low, hissing, revengeful. Teach them a lesson. Chapter 21, Hope and Dreams. They say curiosity killed the cat. Michael figured his curiosity would either get him killed or caught. The voice in his head didn't hesitate. Caught. He was back in Oakland, parked on the same street, watching the same house. It looked the same, crooked blinds, peeling paint, chain link gate slightly ajar. Would they really be dumb enough to still be using it? The bodies had been found a few blocks away, tossed like garbage in a city park. He read the article 3 times, That was the first breadcrumb. The second was memory, something he'd once read about a bank robbed 3 times by the same crew. He'd thought, why not check it out? The answer came 1 hour and 17 minutes later. 3 men, same door, same routine, within 10 minutes of the last time. Predictable, lazy, he was already in position. 3 pulls of the trigger, 3 dead without ceremony. This time, Michael drove up to the curb and jumped out, thinking he'd grab the bags, toss them in the back, and be gone. A shot cracked past him. Bark exploded from the tree to his left. Before he could process, 3 shadows stretched across the pavement, closing in. Panic hit fast. 10 steps to the truck. He calculated he'd make 4 before they took him down. Trying was his only move. If he fell, he'd fall swinging. The voice whispered, calm and certain, "You will not die tonight." Michael believed it. 1 step, 2, hands grabbed him. He was lifted off the ground, but as promised, he swung the heavy duffels, smashing one face, then another. The force knocked one of them off balance. At his feet, something flashed. A switchblade. It would take a miracle, ran through his mind. Then all of a sudden, one of the men he had hit in the face pushed him down with force. That was a miracle. He grabbed the knife. Everything in him tightened as he drove the blade, penetrating flesh. He pulled upward with force. The cut opened from calf to hip. The scream was inhuman. Michael ended it with one horizontal slice across the throat. Silence fell with an edge. The remaining 2 came at him without speaking, blades drawn. When they were close enough for him to see their eyes, the voice shifted. Tap me in. Doubt flickered. In his small, rational voice, the one that still sounded like him, he whispered, "You're tapped in." What followed wasn't a blur. It was precision. One body collapsed against the tree that had taken the bullet moments before. The other was left hanging over the fence, broken and motionless. Michael took 880 to 92, headed toward San Mateo. In a motel parking lot off the highway, he dared to unzip the bags. Same result. Cash, bundles of it. He stared at the money like it might bite him. "This is the last time," he told the voice, but the voice didn't answer. Not yet. He fell asleep in the driver's seat. 6 straight hours. Best sleep he'd had in days. At dawn, he drove south on autopilot, the 101, foggy, gray. He didn't remember making the decision, didn't remember turning off the exit, but the tires knew the road, and his hands kept steering. There's a parking lot near the water, tucked behind several California sycamore trees. Only one other car, a small SUV. Michael, feeling like he may jump out of his skin, walked to the steps with purpose. 2 people sat on a rock, shoulders touching, watching the water like it held answers. Probably talking about the future, he thought, their hopes and dreams. The thought soured in his gut. He didn't remember pulling out the knife, didn't remember walking to the SUV. But suddenly he was there, carving deep, angry lines into the passenger door. December 20th, 68, July 4th, 69, September 27th, 69, October 11th, 69, a list of ghosts. Then he found himself walking down the stairs. He counted them, 41. The couple never turned, never looked up. He wasn't sure when he pulled the gun from his waistband or how his finger had found the trigger, but the deed was done. 2 bodies slumped forward, their heads tilted. A moment of intimacy turned grotesque. Michael stared. His ears rang. His throat clenched. The gun shook in his hand. The fog began to lift, and all he could think was, what did I just do? Children's laughter. Faint to his right, Michael turned his head. Slow, consumed with dread. 2 kids at the water's edge, and a boat, closer than it should have been, coming fast. His silencer had worked, but he hadn't accounted for the boat or the children. He stood frozen, watching the way their hair bounced as they played, hearing their shouts at play, sounds that now had no place here. A voice stirred. Not the voice, the old one, the human one. That was a mistake. Michael turned and ran, 2 steps at a time, up the stairs. At the top, he looked back. The boat was nearly there. The children were safe. Then came the sirens, distant, drawing closer. He was leaving, but the carvings remained, and 2 more names had been added to the ledger of the lost. So much for hope, so much for dreams. Chapter 22. The Smoker. 2 cell phones buzzed almost in unison. Faith and Clara excused themselves, stepping away to answer. Each returned within seconds of the other, faces pale with confirmation. It was the Zodiac. Conversation never found a foothold. Each of them retreated inward, thoughts thick with tension. Sean sat rigid in the passenger seat, his mind circled back to the decision not to engage, not to give the killer what he wanted. It had been a firm stance, logical even, but now 2 young lives are gone. For what? A message? A moment of twisted theater? Maybe it had become fun for him, a distraction, or maybe something worse, a ritual. The details felt like escalation. That's what haunted Sean the most. In the back seat, Clara stared out the window, watching the city pass like a slow-moving reel. Her thoughts were locked on the letter sitting at home. The Chronicle had tried to stay neutral, but she could feel it, the way they hovered, eager, if it helped the story, if it sold papers, the greater good, they liked to call it. She wondered if Sean and the FBI would do the same. He'd asked how the Zodiac had found her address. Why her? Up front, Faith drove, thinking about her luck on the plane and at the airport. She couldn't believe it. She was driving Sean Trammell, a man whose career she'd followed with reverence, and Clara St. Cloud, a journalist whose name had once made her feel less alone. Now she is part of something bigger. She owned a portrait studio downtown. Her manager, Beth, could handle things for a few days. Faith wasn't leaving this story. She was all in. At the scene, yellow tape stretched between posts, fluttering in the breeze. Onlookers clustered just outside the boundary, faces pinched in curiosity and unease. Sean led the way, walking to the tape and stopping just short of brushing it. At over 6 feet, he leaned forward, surveying the site. 2 body bags, 6 officers, scattered evidence markers. A handful of witnesses huddled to the left. A small boat, bow buried in the sand, engine quiet. He was already forming questions. He'd want to speak to the people from the boat first. A young officer approached. "Sir, I need you to take a few steps back." Sean nodded, backing away. That's when he saw the man on the bench across the walkway, young, calm, smoking. His posture was too casual, like he was watching a parade. It landed like a slap. Sean would describe it that way later. The face was too far off for certainty, but in that moment, it almost looked like the man was smirking. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just took one final drag, dropped the cigarette, and began to move. "Sir," the officer said again, "please step back from the scene." Sean turned to acknowledge her. When he looked back, the smoker was jogging, then running. Sean reacted instantly. "Hey, stop!" He sprinted after him. "I just want to talk." But the man didn't slow. If anything, he moved faster. Each word from Sean only pushed him further. Within seconds, he disappeared around a corner, the same direction they'd just come from, a residential web of single-family homes and upscale apartments. Too many ways to vanish. Still, it was worth the chase. Sean called back over his shoulder. "See what the witnesses know. Drop names if you must." Clara gave a tight nod. Sean jumped into the car with Faith, who didn't wait for instructions. They were gone in seconds. Michael felt electric. It wasn't just adrenaline. It was who had almost caught him. Sean Trammell, the Sean Trammell. He recognized him instantly. The documentaries, the books, the voice. And in that moment, yes, they'd made eye contact. He waited, timed it perfectly. When the officer turned Trammell's attention, Michael slipped away. Chapter 23 for Nikki. Clara had name-dropped just as Sean suggested. It got her nowhere. Wrong county, wrong district, no jurisdiction. They couldn't have cared less about some hotshot from out east. Their words, not hers. Faith and Clara were quick to assume the jogger had been the killer. Sean wanted to agree but kept his opinion quiet. There was always a chance it had just been a punk kid, a 2-strike felon with weed in his sock and a warrant on his back. A scared teenager who bolted at the sight of a badge. But something about him, and the way he looked back, the way he ran. Still, Sean said nothing. Not yet. Michael was home. Not home exactly, just a house they were borrowing from the past, one filled with ghosts and echoing things unsaid. He'd told Nikki he'd picked up more side work. The plan was to surprise her, sit her down one day soon, and tell her he had enough saved for a better place. a quiet neighborhood, a real beginning. He didn't know how long the money would last, didn't know how long he would last either, for that matter. When Nikki came home, the kitchen was warm with the smell of browned hash browns and fresh pancakes. He'd made her favorite. She worked hard. She deserved comfort, and nothing beat breakfast for dinner. They both agreed on that. Michael felt good. His head was quiet, no voice. He almost didn't recognize himself without the static. It felt borrowed, like wearing someone else's peace, knowing he would have to give it back soon. For a moment, he was the man he wanted to be. Only he wasn't. This life, this peaceful domestic life, wasn't built to last. Not for him. Sometimes he wondered how his grandfather had done it. Had he really stopped, disappeared into the crowd, lived a full life without ever killing again? Or had he gone underground, becoming myth, leaving the true crime world with nothing but questions and a legacy of fear? Michael couldn't dismiss that theory anymore. If he was willing to believe his grandfather was the Zodiac and he was leaning that way, then why not the rest of it? Why not the vanishing act? Why not the possibility that monsters could simply walk away? From the bedroom, he heard Nikki changing. Dinner and a show, their little routine. He sank into the couch, staring at nothing. Could he build a life with her? A house? Kids? A future wrapped in blood and lies? Could he fake it, even for the best of lives? Then she came around the corner, in sweats a little too big and a smile that lit the entire room. And Michael knew he had to try, even if this life was a house of cards, even if he was the wind. Chapter 24. Disposable Phones. The Chronicle liked to say it was a proud paper. Clara had heard that line for years, whispered in hallways, preached in meetings, stamped into the culture. But today she felt none of that pride. The front page story was hers, her letter, her mailbox, and yet the byline read, Nathan Price. Millions would read it, even more would talk about it, and not one of them would know the truth, that Clara St. Cloud had been the one chosen, not Price. The powers that matter had made their decision without consulting her. They wanted to shift focus. Take the spotlight off Clara. Their solution? Put a man on it. A clean face, a safe choice, the kind of man they could send to morning shows and board meetings without anyone flinching, one on the fast track to a corner office if the rumors were true. And this one certainly was. Clara was still furious, just as she had been that morning. Nothing anyone said could dull the sting. She hadn't just lost a story, she'd lost the story. She sat beside Sean in the lobby of a downtown station, both waiting, forgotten, ignored, like leftovers sealed and shoved to the back of the fridge. Sean flipped through an outdated magazine, but his mind wasn't on celebrity gossip. The killer had escalated, and theatrically so. 2 dead on a beach, a message carved into the side of their vehicle, an echo of the original Zodiac. This one was trying to be clever, or reverent, or both. Sean didn't believe the killer had seen the children. If he had, Sean thought he would have moved on. It was only a gut feeling, but it sat deep and solid in his chest, just like the itch at the back of his brain that he'd already seen the man calling himself Zodiac. Michael read the article twice. It was bland, shallow, sanitized, not up to the quality he deserved, not for the kind of material he was giving them. Nathan Price? Really? From the other room, Nikki was getting ready. They were off to see an apartment she was excited about. Nervous too, but hopeful. She'd been let down before. If she liked it, they'd get it. Michael had already decided. But the article? They'd cut Clara out. Why? Was it fear? Did they think he'd hurt her? Or was it optics? Putting a man on the case to give the public a figure of authority? He didn't know, but he didn't like it. He scrolled again, skimming the words. Experts, so-called, dissecting his work like it was some kind of message puzzle, as if they understood him, as if there was anything to understand. Did the killer hate his parents? Did he hate children? Was he trying to relive the past? Be nostalgic? Michael scoffed. He wasn't trying to send a message. He wasn't nostalgic. He was just being himself. As far as he could tell, it didn't mean anything. Not really. Still, maybe he'd demand they let Clara write again. Yeah, that's what he'd do. A loud laugh burst through the room. Nikki came around the corner, phone held high, showing him a video. a cat chasing a terrified German shepherd in endless circles around a dining room table. She was obsessed with the app that allowed her to watch funny video clips like that. She said it helped her relax. After 45 minutes touring the apartment complex, Nikki decided it wasn't right. Too much carpet, not enough natural light, no space for a home office. Something Michael hadn't known she needed, but now couldn't stop picturing. He hadn't liked the place either, so he was happy to move on. They grabbed lunch, and he listened while she vented about work, the drama, the incompetence, the woman in HR who kept calling her sweetie. Then he dropped her off, said he was heading out to help demo an old barn with some guys. Hard work, good money. He'd be sore, but he'd shower before picking her up. That was the story. Instead, he drove to 6 different wireless providers, the kind tucked into strip malls, behind gas stations, next to liquor stores, the kind that took cash and asked no questions. He bought disposable phones, one at each store. He didn't know exactly what he was doing, not yet, but the idea thrilled him. He'd read online how it worked. Take a picture, send a video, leave no trace, use the phone once or twice, then destroy it. Simple. He pulled one from its packaging. This is the Zodiac. He took a photo, sent it to the number he'd copied onto a scrap of paper and tucked into his wallet. Then, without warning, he stood, laced his shoes, and went for a run. Chapter 25. Tangled. Michael had put on headphones, but halfway through his run, he realized he hadn't picked any music. Still, he didn't stop. His mind was working, faster than his feet, louder than any song. The dreams, were they real? It felt as if he was reliving an act he had already committed. It was vivid, sometimes graphic. As his body worked, so did his deepest emotions. He hadn't enjoyed what he'd done. 2 people, as far as he could tell, just good people. Parents enjoying a day with their kids, the image, the way their bodies dropped, how close the children had been, pressed into something soft inside him. A part of his heart he thought had gone numb. The voice, the one that usually whispered justifications and made it all feel necessary, was gone. So he filled in. Never again, he told himself. It was a mistake, a slip, a line crossed in weakness, not a habit, not who he is. Michael didn't believe everything he told himself these days, but this he believed. He ran faster. The strain in his muscles felt earned, the burn in his lungs, almost holy, the sweat down his spine, cleansing. He pushed harder, welcomed the ache. It gave him something the pills hadn't. Freedom, not the kind sold in bottles, the kind you made for yourself. He got home and collapsed straight onto the kitchen floor, cheek pressed to the cool tile, crawling to the fridge. He grabbed a water bottle, twisted the cap with trembling fingers, and drank like it was the first thing he'd tasted in days. He lay there for nearly 20 minutes, just taking deep breaths and letting his body readjust itself. He loved how he felt, alive, strong, and it hadn't taken drugs, hadn't taken blood. Then, quiet, kind, came the voice. There it is. That's the version of you worth keeping. Clara gasped when the message came through. It was sharp, involuntary, like being burned. Sean looked up, startled enough to drop the outdated Stream and Hunt magazine he'd been pretending to skim. Without thinking, she handed him the phone. Clara stood and walked to the small window in the precinct's waiting room. Outside, the city moved indifferently. Cars rolled by. Lives unfolded. They'd been waiting for nearly an hour. No updates, no detective, no urgency. Sean joined her at the window. He looked down at the phone again, then handed it back. We don't need them anymore, he said. They'll need us soon enough. Then he turned and walked toward the door. 20 minutes later, a junior officer would appear and ask around for the 2 of them, shrug his shoulder like it wasn't the first time folks just got tired of waiting. Outside, Clara and Sean paused on the front steps of the station. Sean inhaled deeply, almost smiling. He was in it now, the heart of the case. He couldn't be closer unless he was doing the killing. Clara's reaction was more complicated. Yes, there was excitement, but it was tangled, knotted with fear, anxiety, and something else she wasn't ready to name. How did he get my personal number? She asked. The words were meant for the wind. Sean was the only one there to hear them. He considered her for a moment. Then Sean spoke. That is one of many questions I would like answered. Chapter 26, Serious-ish. The following afternoon, Clara handed her 2-week notice to Preston Philmont, her immediate supervisor. She didn't linger for small talk. From there, she walked straight to Human Resources, where her longtime friend and colleague Alice Penny was already waiting, smiling, a manila folder in hand. All the paperwork was done. 2 weeks of vacation approved, a payout for the rest of her unused days set to be distributed over her final 2 checks. Alice hugged her tight and whispered, "It's about time." Clara returned to her old desk and picked up the small box she'd packed earlier, framed photos, her favorite coffee mug, a paperweight shaped like a typewriter. She said goodbye to the handful of people she'd truly miss, not co-workers, friends. Then she stepped outside into the late afternoon light, and there he was, Sean, standing on the curb, grinning like a kid who knew a secret. "How's it feel?" he asked. Reckless, she thought, but good. 15 minutes later, they were seated at a local Mexican restaurant, drinks ordered, lunch specials on the way. They had a lot to talk about. Sean had pitched it earlier, only half serious, or as he'd put it, serious-ish. He had a company to run, sure, but he also had a strong team. He and Kenny, his partner at the firm, had talked about Sean taking a step back so he could heal properly. "A podcast," Sean said, talking fast, eyes bright. "A full deep dive. The original Zodiac, the modern copycat, the psychology, the evidence. It's perfect. The reporter and the investigator. It practically sells itself." Clara laughed. "So, this is what serious-ish looks like." "Hey," I said, "ish." Sean grinned. They scribbled rough ideas on napkins between bites of rice and carnitas, name possibilities, format, tone, sponsors. But eventually, the hard questions arrived. How should they respond to the latest message from the Zodiac? And more importantly, how did he get Clara's personal information? The server had stopped checking in long ago. The place wasn't busy. They didn't feel guilty lingering. Clara unlocked her phone. The message still sat there, waiting. "This is the Zodiac. I am not happy with the way your employer has treated us. I have purchased 6 burner phones. That's 6 opportunities for you to get information for a story, a book, a podcast, whatever you like. It also gives your new friend 6 chances to catch me. Since I doubt we'll ever find ourselves in the same place at the same time as we did at the beach the other day, what a beautiful day for a jog. The view was perfect. I didn't want to do that. It wasn't me." The word "me" had been scribbled over violently, repeatedly, but moving forward, it will be like before. Only those who've done wrong, only those who deserve punishment for their crimes against society. Clara stared at the screen. The killer had handwritten the note, taken a picture of it, and sent it from the burner. Chapter 27, Nikki Thing. A day and a half later, Michael's phone buzzed. He told himself he hadn't been waiting. Not really. Deep down, he knew she'd respond. How could she not? The Zodiac, true crime, headlines, podcasts. It was all the rage. Besides, she had a partner now, the investigator. She wouldn't be able to resist. In the meantime, things with Nikki had been going surprisingly well. They found a small cottage on the outskirts of town. The owner, a retired teacher, was taking an extended cruise through Asia and needed someone to house, sit, and care for a few animals. It was kind of becoming Nikki's thing, as they joked. Chickens, goats, a couple of horses, 1 moody cow. Nikki said yes before even asking him. He found out after the fact, and surprisingly, he didn't mind. They'd be saving a lot on rent. Michael used the savings to buy her a car, not new, but reliable, clean, still under warranty, something she could trust, something she was proud to drive. She used to joke that the Monte Carlo would either leave her stranded or force her to hitchhike with a serial killer. Her words. There'd be a few nights in a hotel between homes, but really, it was perfect. Nikki said the Lord was looking out for them. Michael wasn't so sure. He figured the Lord had written him off. Didn't care where he lived, had probably already planned a painful ending just for him. But still, the peace felt nice. Michael wasn't worried about Nikki seeing the messages. She was at her parents' house, helping her mom pick out dishes to pass down. The message from Clara read, Zodiac, is there anything I can say to cause you to turn yourself in and stop this? Michael shook his head. Predictable. He typed, Clara, this is the Zodiac. Please report my communications. Your mode of communication is at your discretion. Innocent lives will be spared by your compliance. Only those deemed guilty of crimes against their community will be punished. You'd better hurry. He's getting restless. He read it twice, satisfied. Michael had never considered himself a deep thinker. Not philosophical, not complicated. He just wanted to make his point and maybe give Clara a reason, a clear one, to finally tell the story she already wanted to tell. Chapter 28, A Podcast. Faith was waiting outside the Airbnb. Sean and Clara stepped out, still laughing at something that had happened behind closed doors. At the sight of Faith, the laughter faded, not abrupt. Still, the shift in energy didn't go unnoticed. Hi, Faith said, brushing her hair behind one ear with a practiced smile. Heard you quit the paper, she added, nodding toward Clara. And neither of you have been by the precinct in a few days. A beat. Everything okay? You two got your own thing going now? The tone was casual, but the look in her eyes was sharp, curious, maybe even a little hurt. Faith was attractive, and she knew it. She was using it now. Sean looked from Faith to Clara. He saw the flicker behind Clara's eyes, not anger, not regret, something closer to defeat. He turned back to Faith. No, he said, calm, steady. Nothing yet. We've just decided to tackle this one on our own. A pause. But thank you for everything. Then, without thinking, he reached for Clara's hand, walked her to the car, opened the passenger door. As they drove off, silence bloomed between them, thick with a question neither had asked. So, Sean answered, Clara, that wasn't an act back there, he said, foot a little heavier on the gas. If the feelings aren't mutual, I'll let it go, but I wanted you to know. She turned toward him and smiled. Her hand found his on the gear shift. Later that afternoon, they made their way to a local cafe. A friend of Clara's from high school, someone she hadn't seen in years, was already waiting in the back. Laptop open, half-eaten muffin pushed aside. He had a podcast. Nothing major, but he'd been at it a couple years and knew his way around the setup. He slid a checklist across the table. Software, hosting platforms, artwork requirements, promotion tips. All the things they hadn't even begun to think about. Clara hadn't told him the topic, just said 2 40-somethings wanted to start something. Sean sat back and listened, jotted down notes. He could feel it clicking, not all at once, but in pieces. The Zodiac had captured attention for decades. Now, a podcast with direct communication from a modern-day copycat? It could work. Maybe. What he was sure of, for now at least, was that Clara had been standing in front of him, and somehow he hadn't seen it. Smart, grounded, quiet at times, but funny once she opened up, and passionate, especially when it comes to true crime. That's when she lit up. Sean felt bad for the way he left it with Faith, so he sent her a text. It was clumsy and apologetic, which is exactly how Sean would describe himself most days. After the cafe, they went shopping. A couple $100 bought microphones, soundproofing panels, and basic recording equipment, an investment in the project, in themselves, in each other, then had a nice dinner at a pizza and beer establishment where Clara's niece was already waiting. Ash, early 20s, sharp as a tack, dyed hair, laptop already open before they even sat down. She's kind of a whiz, Clara said. She built a true crime site in high school, went viral for a while. Ash didn't disappoint. She walked them through the tech, setting up a podcast feed, connecting it to apps, designing a landing page. She paused when they needed to write something down, spoke clearly, never condescending. She made it feel almost possible. By the time the night ended, Sean felt like they had a shot, or maybe not. He wasn't sure. Later, he called Kenny and Leonard, gave them the highlights, told them he was keeping it casual. Both said the same thing, different words, same warning. Don't get in too deep. Deep may not be the word for it, but it was close. Chapter 29. The Hendersons. Nikki had picked up an extra shift. One of her co-workers needed the day off. Michael was pretty sure she'd told him why. He hadn't listened. Before leaving, she made him an egg, bacon, and cheese bagel, wrapped in a paper towel, waiting in the microwave, a cute note on the counter. Church was still a point of contention, but they were trying to work around it. The morning paper was folded neatly on his beanbag. The front page stared up at him, a photo of the couple, smiling, bright, alive. They had no idea what was coming, no way of knowing that a man they'd never met, a man with a fractured sense of purpose, would be the reason their children grew up without them. Less than 1% of murders each year are committed by serial killers, but the Hendersons had pulled the short straw. Michael sank into his chair and read the entire article. All he could think was, what a shame. Asia, age 3, Trent, 17 months. Their names felt heavy in his mouth, even though he never said them aloud. The article said they'd be raised by grandparents. No other details. Just enough for the reader to imagine bedtime stories told by trembling voices, holidays with 2 empty chairs, grief with no expiration date. Nathan Bland Price had written the piece. Of course he had, pulling heartstrings like it was a competition, making sure the public felt something. Michael felt it too. He thought of his own parents, his mother, the father that had disowned him on numerous occasions, how complicated that had all been, how permanent the damage still was. He wondered if Bianca Henderson was as perfect as Nathan made her sound. Top of her class, a degree in the sciences, a prestigious academic post, charity board member, recent promotion, all good things. But did they make her a good mother? It doesn't hurt. The voice of reason offered. Nathan had painted the picture, and Elmer, her husband, world-class chef, a name in luxury hotel kitchens, fed the elite by night, volunteered at shelters by day, read to the elderly on Sundays. Michael muttered, of course he did. Any hope that Elmer was a bad person was erased with each keystroke. Michael had killed good people. He threw up, twice, then went to the gym. A good sweat, that's what he told himself. That's what he needed. For the next hour and 40 minutes, he punished himself. Heavy weights, long sets, pain. But when the music stopped and silence came rushing in, he let himself fall hard to the floor and cried, not for himself, for the children. It hadn't been his intention. He would have walked away. If he'd seen them, he would have walked. Bianca could have kept building her life, contributing to science and charity. Elmer could have kept feeding the rich and the poor, kept reading to the old folks. Michael slammed the garage door behind him and took off down the street, an impromptu run, fast, furious. But there was no relief, just the pounding of his feet and the sound of grief chasing close behind. Chapter 30, Hunting. Nikki was glowing. The cottage with its cobblestone path, flower beds, and old stone fireplace felt like a miracle. Everything was lining up. She still wished Michael would pick a path, change his mind about church and control his emotions. But he was working, bringing in money, contributing, and Nikki could see he was trying. That was enough for now. They were young. There was still time. He'd figure it out. She'd been worried about him recently. He'd seemed off, distant, distracted. There had even been a moment, brief but real, when she thought he might be cheating. She'd checked. No strange texts. No new smell of perfume. No unexplained absences. Whatever had been bothering him, it seemed like he'd left it behind at the old house. Sadly, she was wrong. The box and its contents had already been packed into a footlocker, secured, ready for the new home. Michael knew what needed to be done, but he couldn't do it. Not yet. He'd written a second note to Clara, part warning, part apology, written under pressure. The voice wasn't going to let him keep avoiding the hunt. The rage had returned, sharper this time, more focused. He'd been lifting, running, getting stronger, but that was his body. The voice reminded him, strength is not the same thing as control. Nikki had taken her car. The Monte Carlo was acting up again, water pump this time. That was fine. Michael would take the bike. No brand, no decals, yard sale gold, $20. The second one he bought in 3 weeks. Nikki had raised an eyebrow. He'd shrugged. Police would find that bike later, behind a bar, covered in blood. But for now, he rode. He weaved through town, past the shops, the restaurants, toward the college bars. That part of town drew everyone. college kids, con artists, dealers, hookers, and lately there is a different kind of predator. Michael knew what to look for. He learned from someone who knew, someone who'd almost drowned in that world before clawing their way out. He'd heard about two brothers who worked this side of town. Everyone said they were traffickers, smooth talkers who preyed on girls too drunk to think clearly. He'd gotten close before. No luck. One more try, the voice said. So, he tried. He followed a group of women from a distance. They moved bar to bar, laughing, spilling drinks, disappearing into music and lights. Then, finally, the brothers. Tall, confident, like wolves stepping into a clearing. Michael didn't follow, waited. He watched how they scanned the room. They weren't looking for one, the one who'd bring the highest return. The group splintered. An hour passed. Then he saw it. One of the brothers slipped his jacket around a girl's shoulders, led her outside, into the night. Chapter 31, Veronica. Michael watched, jaw tight. The second brother slowly pulled away from the curb. Slowly, he heads in the same direction as his brother. He stayed close to the couple, close enough to intervene, far enough not to be noticed. They looked like any young couple out on a Friday night, laughing, whispering, flirting. Then he took her hand, led her away from the crowd, down a path lined with hedges and half-lit street lamps, a path he knew well. Michael followed. They turned left, slipped into near-total darkness. An alley. At the far end, Michael could just make out the silhouette of a car. The brother. He couldn't see the couple anymore. Then, as if on cue, a gasp, followed by a low grunt. Michael's stomach flipped, no hesitation. The bike struck the man hard behind the knees, right as Michael surged forward. No warning, no chance to react. Michael pulled the girl back, shielding her with his body on instinct. Then something snapped. The alley would tell the story later. Scuffed brick, a bent frame, concrete streaked with blood. No witnesses, no mercy. Michael took the first brother down before the man even registered what had hit him. The second arrived late, confident. It didn't matter. Two bodies, limbs twisted like mannequins, left in a heap. They had planned to erase a life, so he erased them. Her name was Veronica Tillett. She survived. The moment she opened her eyes, she screamed, something raw that didn't stop until the EMTs arrived. But survival wasn't rescue. What she saw when she came to, what she heard echoing in that alley, it would never leave her. Her parents would spend years and thousands of dollars trying to bring her back, therapists, clinics, specialists. None of it would be enough. Some trauma doesn't fade. It takes root. Michael knew the bike had to stay. Too much blood. Too much risk. He stripped off his sweatshirt and sweatpants in another alley, swapped into shorts and a windbreaker from his backpack. Old sneakers, worn thin, went into a trash bag and never came home. He jogged, blending in. Just another guy staying fit, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. He showered long and hot, scrubbed until the water ran cold, then collapsed into his beanbag chair, calm, centered, breathing deep. This is the Zodiac. Chapter 32. It's time. Sean woke to the bed shifting beneath him. Clara was bouncing on the mattress, wearing his sweatpants, his favorite pullover, and his old ball cap. Her long brown hair pulled through the back. "Am I wearing your stuff today?" Sean asked, grinning. Clara smirked mid-bounce. "Do you have a problem with that? You wear whatever you want." "Good," she said, handing him her phone. "Because when you read this, you might want to get dressed." A new message. "This is the Zodiac. It's time." The decision is yours, but we both know a podcast would be a winner. There's an envelope under the mat back door. Everything you'll need for your first episode, I'd guess. Zip. Sean was out of bed in seconds. 10 minutes later, they were on the road. 20-something after that, standing on Clara's back steps. Sean crouched and lifted the mat. A manila envelope rested beneath it. He scanned the yard, instincts flaring. No doorbell cam, no motion lights. None of the neighbors had them either. Older neighborhood, retired residents, an HOA, a few nosy window watchers. Safe, comfortable, the kind of place where no one would expect a serial killer to stroll through the backyards. If they only knew. Sean turned to say something to Clara and froze. She was pale, still. Her posture stiff, her expression unreadable. Before he could ask, his phone rang. Kenny. He stepped aside to take the call. By the time he hung up, Clara had already opened the envelope and laid the contents across the kitchen table. He joined her. Notes, timelines, newspaper clippings, coordinates, phrases that echoed earlier messages, a chilling amount of detail. It was everything they'd need to launch a podcast, as promised. Clara was already talking, rapid-fire thoughts about episode structure, narrative tone, and how to blend facts with assumption. Like this was the story she'd been waiting for her whole life. Sean didn't move. He watched her glide through the kitchen. She looked so sure, so unshakable, but she wasn't bulletproof. And this guy wasn't playing games. And this wasn't just a podcast. He called Kenny back. Kenny agreed. Yeah, it could make a killer podcast, but it could also make a great Dateline episode, one where he and Clara were the victims. Sean had thought of that too. There was something familiar in the Zodiac's tone, the arrogance, the invitation to play along, just like the first, always performing for the press. When Clara emerged with a rolling suitcase, her smile could not have been wider. She had no idea. Not really. Back at the rental, Sean sat her down. He and Kenny stressed the danger, the manipulation, the unknowns. Clara listened, asked smart questions, and in the end, she made her decision. Then let's tell it right, she said. Chapter 33. A Good Place. The air inside the dealership was thick. Michael could hardly stand it. Too many smiles, too much chatter, customers signing papers in cubicles, others lounging on couches, watching a cooking show while their vehicles were serviced. It was all too much. He'd been there 20 minutes. The HR director, her name started with an S, had asked him to shadow someone named Andrew. Andrew went by Wrecker. Only Michael couldn't find him, and the salesmen weren't exactly helpful. They shrugged, acted like Wrecker didn't exist. He'd remember that. Eventually, he found him, 5'7" maybe, 150 pounds, receding hairline, a face that wore disappointment like a birthmark. Michael was only there because of Nikki. It started a few weeks ago. She'd begun talking about their future, careers, finances, adulting. Then came college talk, degrees, what ifs. When Michael made it clear he had no 5-year plan, no career path, Nikki switched gears. She didn't get mad. She got motivated, mission mode. Fix this, fast or else. Michael didn't want to know what the or else was. They were in a good place. The money wasn't running out anytime soon, but he couldn't exactly tell her that, could he? So, when she found him a great opportunity at a respected local Chevy dealer, a family friend, someone from church, he went along with it, which is how he ended up smoking a cigarette outside the service bay, standing next to a man who insisted on being called Wrecker. 4.5 hours later, Michael felt like he'd taken a master class in dealership operations. Wrecker knew his stuff. Michael was impressed. He even felt a little guilty for writing the guy off. By the end of day 1, he was looking forward to the second. The next morning was spent in the service drive, the front line, where customers arrived for appointments. It was high pressure, customer-facing, and fast-paced. Wrecker was smooth, quick with the software, calm with complaints. Michael found he was pretty good too. He could turn on the charm when he wanted to, and this mattered to Nikki, so it mattered to him. The voice in his head hadn't gone away. It whispered about the job, about the customers. Not all of them were polite. The worst ones, the voice wanted to know where they lived. Michael pushed it away. Until after lunch, a man and his teenage son pulled into the service lane. At first, everything seemed normal. Then the man asked how long the service would take. The young woman at the desk told him, a couple of hours. That's when the swearing started. He demanded a loaner vehicle. She apologized. There were none available. More swearing. Raised voice. Wrecker stepped in, tried to calm him, and probably planned on finding the man something to drive. But the man didn't give anyone a chance to speak. He turned on Wrecker, loud, cruel, some may say abusive, called the dealership trash, threatened to call the owner, who he claimed was a friend. The son never looked up, just stared at his phone like this was routine. A shame, the voice whispered. At the very least, the father should be taught a lesson. Without thinking, Michael wedged himself between Wrecker and the customer. He was standing inches from the guy. The man was taller, but Michael had him by 20 pounds, and something deeper, They locked eyes. Michael's voice was steady. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but you can't speak to our staff that way. There's a waiting area inside or some picnic tables outside. I'd be happy to show you." A pause. With a huff, the now quit customer grabbed his son, and they went outside looking at inventory on the lot. "Good choice." The voice spoke with a little bravado. At the end of the day, Michael sat outside an office located down a long hallway. He had never been down this hall. Wished he wasn't now. His phone buzzed with Nikki's messages. He ignored them. He had no good answers. Didn't know if he still had a job. He was told to wait. So he waited. Wrecker and the young woman, Tracy, maybe, were inside with the boss. Michael sat on a plastic chair, thought about the voice, thought about the last few weeks. Turns out, the voice said, it's easier to knock off drug dealers, steal their money, and lie to your girlfriend. Michael exhaled. The voice wasn't wrong. Chapter 34. The first episode was done. Sean thought the finished product was good, not just good for beginners, just good. Getting there, though, that was another story. They recorded 2 full segments without hitting record, erased the same one twice. At one point, a coffee spill nearly took out the laptop. Twice they paused, unsure they'd finish it all, but in the end they did. 1 hour and 28 minutes, a podcast. Zodiac, Attempted Redemption. With help from Clara's network, a few social media nudges, and the public's endless appetite for Zodiac content, it launched with traction. It was exciting. It was real. They had 4 days before Kenny's flight arrived, at least a week before Leonard would drive in. He didn't fly anymore, not if he could help it. Clara was looking forward to meeting Sean's friends. She checked the listener count 5 times that morning, giggled one time. She'd spent her whole career chasing someone else's truth. Now the truth had her name on it. Sean. He was looking forward to having backup. Nikki rounded the back of the car and gave Michael the look, the one that said, "We had the talk. Please don't screw this up." They had talked multiple times over the last 10 hours, ever since she picked him up, ever since he told her exactly what happened, how the manager had thanked him for standing up for his coworkers. She knew what Michael could be like, so did he, but he was trying, and today, he was in good spirits. He'd gone for a run that morning and listened to a new podcast. Well done, smart, oddly familiar. Clara's voice, that detective. The title didn't sit right with him. Attempted redemption, attempted, like he hadn't done the work, like he hadn't tried, like Clara had already decided how the story ends. It felt unfair, dismissive, final. Still, maybe it fit. Time would tell. Today, he and Wrecker were on the sales side of things. Morning meeting, walking the lot, learning the product. Not as fun as it sounds, Michael decided. Nikki was working tonight. He'd lift later. Wrecker took his time, answered every question. He had this way of explaining things like they were secret moves in a video game, no bragging. Michael offered to buy lunch. Wrecker raised an eyebrow. You buying? Afterward, they covered loaners, tags, gas cards, new inventory, and trades. A lot of moving parts. Wrecker had been there 8 years. He'd seen it all. Michael found himself listening. Near the end of the day, GM Derek Spencer approached them. Asked if they'd run 2 brand new Corvettes across town to have protective coating applied. Michael caught the look from the sales guys, flickers of resentment, slight, but visible. But Wrecker, he was thrilled. Michael, same. Even if it was just a 10-minute drive, it was the coolest thing he'd done in a long time. He clocked out later than usual. As he walked down the hall, Mr. Spencer appeared, casual, friendly. He went out of his way to stop Michael. How'd you like the drive? Michael couldn't stop smiling. Loved it. Seriously. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. He said it 3 times, maybe 4. Spencer chuckled. There'll be more chances, he said. You're doing good, Michael. Keep it up. He patted Michael on the shoulder and walked on. Boss or not, the guy was all right in his book. And for the first time in a while, things felt like they might actually stay good. That thought lingered too long. Things didn't fall into place like this. Not for him, not without a cost. Chapter 35, Redemption. The first episode of the podcast was a success. Not because of its title, not because of the recent killings. It worked because Clara and Sean had earned it. Podcasting does not reward hype alone. Headlines helped, sure, but they are not enough. If your content doesn't say something, it will wither away. Clara and Sean had something to say. They gave insight. They offered first-hand accounts. Her communications with the killer, his analysis of the writings, and more than anything, they sounded like they meant it. Clara opened the episode with a plea. She asked the killer to turn himself in, to get help, to save himself, his family from more grief. It came from the heart, and it landed. Sean followed with a brief history of the original Zodiac, not a deep dive, just enough to reset the table. Most people knew the broad strokes, but the reminder grounded the listener. It set the tone. Then came the facts, back and forth. Their cadence was easy, natural. Listeners heard what Sean already knew. They worked together. There was chemistry, not just romantic, though that was there. They were a team. The heart of the episode was in its name, attempted redemption. The killer had made it clear. He would only kill those he believed were guilty of crimes against the community, a vigilante, a legacy haunted by blood. Was it redemption, revenge, replication? Sean brought in a professor from Berkeley, someone willing to speak on the philosophy of penance, personal, cultural, and generational. Clara contacted a retired Chronicle colleague, once considered the paper's expert on the original Zodiac. Both segments added depth, credibility, weight. Special care was given to the victims. Clara and Sean had agreed from the beginning. They would not pass judgment. They weren't the court system. They weren't God. Whatever the killer believed, every victim deserved dignity. Each was a child of God. Each taken by someone many would say was possessed by the devil. The tone was reverent, grounded, not excusing, not exploiting, just human. It ran 1 hour and 28 minutes. By nightfall, the comments were coming in. Most were thoughtful, curious, grateful, but some weren't. Some accused them of cashing in, of turning tragedy into content, of building a platform on someone else's pain. Opportunists, one wrote. 2 more voices pretending to care while chasing clicks. Clara didn't respond. She just closed the screen and walked away. Later that night, she and Sean sat in silence and listened to the episode again. At first, they were surprised, then nervous. "How do we top that?" she asked. Sean didn't have an answer, but they both knew. They had to try. Chapter 36. No Time for Faith. Kenny would never get used to airports, the hustle, the crowd-controlled chaos, the urgent need to hurry up and wait. He'd also never quite shaken his fear of heights, but he wasn't about to spend 2 or 3 days on the road, not in a car, on a train, or stuffed into a bus, when a plane could get him there in a few hours. Clara and Sean were waiting at a high-top table near the bar when he arrived. Drinks poured, nachos just arriving. It felt like old friends were reuniting, comfortable, natural. Kenny listened to the podcast during the flight. He told them he liked it, the pacing, the tone, the balance between fact and feeling. They were visibly pleased. It did his heart good to see Sean that happy. Over margaritas, Sean and Kenny told Clara how they'd first met, stories she already half knew from her deep dive into the Defender of Children case. But hearing it from them, the tension, the details, the humor in hindsight, brought the connection to life. Shortly after the nachos arrived, so did Faith, smiling wide, skirt short, high energy. "Well, fancy meeting you 3 here," she said, sliding up to the table. "I listened to your podcast today. So good." Before Sean could speak, his phone rang. It was the detective assigned to the Zodiac case. They'd already dropped copies of their materials, letters, audio, timelines, everything, along with a heads up about the podcast and their intentions, what they'd cover, what they wouldn't, and how they viewed the department's performance so far. The call confirmed a meeting with the higher-ups, 9 a.m. sharp. When Sean got back to the table and apologized for stepping away, he asked their server for the tab. He waited until Faith finished speaking on how she had put Clara and Sean together before apologizing to her, explaining that they needed to run so they could prepare for the following morning. Outside, Kenny chuckled. "She must know one of the bartenders." "Bet my house on it," Clara laughed. "No way she just happens to be here." Faith stood by the bar, drink untouched, gaze fixed on the door they'd just walked through. Just a quiet recognition that whatever she thought she might have been part of, she wasn't. On the drive back to the Airbnb, Sean filled them in on the morning meeting. "You think they'll try to shut it down?" Clara asked quietly. "They might try," Sean said, "but they're too late." Clara stared out the window, chewing her bottom lip. "Still, if this gets bigger, if he escalates, that's why we're showing up, being transparent. It's the only play that keeps us safe." Sean was confident, but not careless. They all knew tomorrow could change everything. Then Leonard called, causing the stress level in the small SUV to drop below manageable levels. He and Styx were few days out, sleeping in the back of his truck at rest stops and Walmart parking lots. Old school road trip. "Trip's been great so far," Leonard said. "Weather's good, traffic light, just enjoying the open road and the beautiful landscape God created." Sean smiled at the sound of his voice. Chapter 37. Marcy. The news article laid it out plainly. If the charges were true, Marcy Ann Marie Johnson wasn't just a bad person. She was a contender for the worst mother in recorded history. 3 children, ages 3 to 7, left alone for weeks while she and her boyfriend took cross-country road trips. Little food, no power, no running water, black mold, rodents, lice. She told the kids not to leave the apartment, that monsters would get them if they tried. So 3 terrified children sat, holding on to one another, waiting until their mother came crashing in like a thunderstorm and disappearing again just as fast. Marcy is out now. Technicality, found by her lawyer. The article mentioned she wasn't allowed to leave the county and was staying with her Aunt May. Thanks for that, Michael had thought. In the court of public opinion, Marcy was already convicted. She knew it, her aunt knew it too, but May had been close with Marcy's mother. Blood trumped logic. She wouldn't leave her only niece out on the street, even if she was guilty, which she was. Some people didn't deserve a second chance. That's why he exists now. The house sat on a double lot just outside the edge of the party district, surrounded by a low black iron fence, installed sometime in the 70s, more symbolic than secure. Michael watched the house twice that week, Tuesday and Friday. On those nights, he told Nikki he was working late, doing inventory in the parts department. Marcy smoked outside. Her aunt insisted. She usually had her last cigarette around 11 p.m. Michael had arranged a spa weekend for Nikki and her mother. They won't be home until sometime tomorrow. It was raining, not ideal, but he'd make the most of it. He crouched behind the large porch swing, hidden from view. A ridiculous amount of personal information was available online. Marcy was careless, and her aunt? She'd had her used Buick Regal serviced at the dealership. Too easy. The screen door creaked open. Marcy stepped out, drink in one hand, balancing a pack of smokes, lighter, and what looked like a cell phone in the other. The lighting was poor. Her aunt usually watches TV in the front room. No visitors had come during previous stakeouts. Marcy was a big woman. She flopped onto the porch swing, sending it rocking backward. The wooden slats pounded into Michael's chest. The impact took his breath. His grunt masked by thunder. The rain thickened. Michael adjusted, steadied himself. Then, through the wooden slats of the swing, he struck, the blade finding its target, withdrawing fast, moving up 3 slats, 2 quick jabbing motions, and finally a cut across the neck as the body was falling forward. She tried to scream, but it came out garbled. The rain on metal drowned the rest. He didn't need to see the pool of blood spreading beneath her to know she was dead. He could feel it. The plan was simple. Jump the back fence, walk to the car, pick up a pizza, head home, maybe work out, long shower. It all still sounded great. But first, Michael opened the screen door. Chapter 38. It just felt right. Forensic Files was playing on an old floor model television, late 70s, maybe early 80s. The living room wasn't cluttered, just 2 recliners, the TV, and a wooden cabinet filled with keepsakes Auntie had collected over a lifetime. Nothing of value. But to her, it was everything. Auntie was asleep in one of the recliners, her head tilted, mouth slightly open. Michael had helped himself to a beer and eased into the other chair. No reason, it just felt right. The voice didn't suggest it. He made the decision on his own. The recliner looked comfortable. The beer was cold. The episode looked new. so why not? One episode turned into 3. 4 beers turned into a few shots from the liquor cabinet. He wandered through the house, took a little cash, a few nice pieces of jewelry. Now he wasn't just a murderer, he now considered himself a thief, too. At 2:30 a.m., he was ready to leave. Rain still pelted the windows. He walked to the door, keys in hand, then paused, turned halfway back, stopped, then walked to the old woman. She hadn't stirred. On the side table near her chair were her glasses, a remote, and a neat stack of letters. He hadn't noticed them before. He wished he still hadn't, but he had. And now he was standing in front of her, deciding. He listened to the rain, waited for her to wake up. In the end, there was no word, sound, or reason to stop. One shot to the head, quick, clean. He made his exit. He told himself Auntie was better off. The cancer was too far along. The insurance payments were months behind. The house would be sold to cover unpaid taxes. There was nowhere for her to go. Her final days would have been agony. Now she wouldn't feel any of it. The meeting began promptly at 9 a.m. No waiting this time. Clara, Sean, and Kenny sat on one side of the room. Facing them were a dozen representatives, local detectives, FBI agents, and members of the task force. Introductions were made. Clara answered their questions clearly. She told them what she'd told Sean and Kenny earlier. She had no idea who the Zodiac was. She didn't know how he got her name, her address, or her number. She just didn't know. The questions came rapid fire, but Clara was ready. She'd had practice. Sean and Kenny watched carefully. The officials nodded, occasionally scribbled notes. They'd done their homework, not just on Clara, but on Sean, Kenny, and Leonard. A few implied they'd listened to the podcast. More nods. Then, just as the meeting was winding down, Clara's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, put her phone in her bag, then couldn't get out of the building fast enough. "This is the Zodiac speaking," is all she had read. Chapter 39, Eye for an Eye. Michael and Nikki had the day off. They walked hand in hand around the small fenced-in yard, watching the third rescue pup they'd visited. His name was Buddy, a wiry little thing with expressive eyes. The staff had told his story. Buddy was a survivor. Michael found himself rooting for the dog, but he kept that to himself. This was Nikki's thing. She lifted Buddy into her arms and smiled. "I think he's the one. What do you think?" Michael laughed. For a moment, he let himself picture it. This life, this family, this dog. "Good practice for a baby," he joked. The voice laughed louder. "A dog is the best you're gonna get. You won't live long enough to see a baby." 2 hours later, they were back at the cottage with a new dog, a dog bed, food, treats, toys, a car seat, a blanket, 2 leashes, and a personalized water bowl. This is the Zodiac. This was not the voice. All me blood of the Zodiac running through my veins. Don't spend 1 second feeling sorry for her. She was guilty. Feel sorry for the system that failed the aunt and those children. A system that feels no heat for its blind eye. But what if? Zishan read the message 3 times. Kenny, 4. The system, blind eye. But what if? Kenny muttered. Literal? A threat? A challenge? Then he asked. To no one in particular. Who was the judge in the Marcy Johnson case? Within a minute, Judge Clinton Westfield, 37 years on the bench. Married for 42, 5 children, 12 grandchildren. Tough but fair. A no-nonsense presence in the courtroom. Old school, reliable, unbending. The room agreed. The message could be a direct threat. They needed eyes on him. Now Michael had beaten them to it. The judge had just finished a game of pickleball. Buddy was at Nikki's workplace being introduced as their newest family member. The little guy was scheduled for microchipping later that afternoon. Michael's excuse was simple. He needed to stop by work to finish a training video. Nikki didn't question it. Michael timed it perfectly. The judge packed up, said his goodbyes, and walked to his SUV parked in the closest handicap space. Michael jogged casually, slowed near the SUV, then sped up at just the right angle. A bump, a slip, an accident. The judge hit the pavement hard, and then 2 quick slashes to the face, not deep, not fatal, but enough. Message sent. Michael kept his hood in place, straightened up, put his headphones in his ears, and jogged on. Didn't look back. Too many people. But no one is close enough to really see. The layout of the courts and parking lot, a wide V shape, oak tree in the center, gave him the cover he needed. Adrenaline surged. After a few minutes, he was sweating. He removed the hoodie, switched to over-the-ear headphones, stripped down to bare chest, and cheap running shorts, unrecognizable now. Just another guy enjoying the day. There were families nearby, a couple with a stroller, a pair of men holding hands. The world spun on. He stopped right when the body was being moved. Police, CSI. Then he saw her and the detective, a third man with them. Someone new. He knew it was time to go. He just couldn't, even when he noticed the cameras capturing crowd shots. Even then, he stayed. Time to leave. The voice wasn't asking. Michael jogged toward a bike he'd stashed nearby, bent to grab the duffel bag and froze. His name. Someone was calling his name. Again, he ignored the voice. Then again, Muffler, that voice, that nickname. Michael's stomach twisted. It was Muffler, a co-worker, the kind who talked too much, remembered too much. Bad, very bad. Michael mounted the bike and rode off in the opposite direction. Within the hour, he and Nikki were at Smitty's. They were eating wings, shooting pool, and showing off Buddy. He made sure they took photos, made sure they posted. Under duress, it was the best he could do. Chapter 40, Public, Facebook, X, TikTok. All of them were showing the same footage. Clips of the judge, confused, bleeding, carried away by medics. A well-respected judge of color, attacked in broad daylight in an upscale park with families and children nearby. The Zodiac struck the legal system, and this time it hit differently. It felt like a line had been crossed, as if he hadn't already crossed a dozen. The clips were being watched and shared by thousands, maybe millions. Nikki sat on the couch, watching the coverage, biting her lip. "This has to be good for the police," she said aloud. Michael didn't answer. He picked up his breakfast and walked into the other room, leaving Nikki confused. Michael's mood has shifted. Again, he'd been off lately, and not in a small way. They had the cottage. Michael had a job. Buddy, the only change. Michael's mood swings. Short temper. Probably stress from work. That was normal, right? She followed him, kissed his cheek, and promised to surprise him with dinner after their shifts. Then she was gone. Michael stood in the shower, anger curling deep, not at himself, at everyone else, at the world for reacting like he was the bad guy. That judge wasn't dead. He'd just never see again. The man had turned a blind eye. Now he was blind. An eye for an eye. Within the hour, Michael was at the dealership. Bright lights, shiny cars, idle chatter. Two of the sales guys were talking about a customer from the night before. Then, Muffler. "Man, why'd you ignore me? Just took off." He was close. Too close. A close talker. Michael could feel the eyes in the room shifting. "Muffler," he said, steady. "Did you stop at Taco Bell on the way in?" Laughter broke out. "I don't know what you're talking about," Michael added. "But if I dissed you, my bad. I didn't see you." "Didn't see me? I was yelling your name. The whole park thought I was your jilted lover, begging you to come back to me." Now the room was laughing harder. Michael grinned, played along. "Well, I was with Nikki, so I don't think that would have gone over well, but Muffler didn't let it go." "No, I saw you. Right there. Attack on the judge. Front and center. Tight little running shorts. Looking like you just ran a marathon. Then quieter. And when you saw me, you booked it. Make him shut up," the voice snapped. Michael smiled, waved it off. "You've got me confused with somebody else." But as he turned to leave, he heard it. "Look, here." The quick pivot Muffler had his phone out. A small crowd had formed. Michael walked over slowly. "I don't know how in God's name you think that guy looks like me," he said, pointing at the screen. "I've got him by 20 pounds. My legs are way more defined." He squinted. "But he does have great hair." That got another laugh. He turned, started walking toward the parts department, paused, then turned back. "Muffler," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Next time you see me in public, just run right up, pinch my butt, and give me a big old kiss. You have my permission." Laughter again, bigger this time, everyone except Muffler. He wasn't laughing because he knew. He'd seen Michael, and he was right. Chapter 41. This is the Zodiac. This was not the voice in my head. It was all me. Blood of the Zodiac running through my veins. Don't spend 1 second feeling sorry for that woman. She was guilty. Feel sorry for the system that failed the aunt and those children, a system that feels no heat for its blind eye. But what if? The message filled one entire wall of the task force conference room. Kenny stood in front of it, arms crossed, studying, obsessing. Sean and Clara leaned against the far wall, watching him. They were waiting for Leonard, who, as usual, was late. The meeting wouldn't start for another hour. Still, the message loomed like a prophecy. Kenny spoke aloud, eyes never leaving the screen. What do you think no heat for its blind eye means? No one answered. He turned to look at them. No heat, like no punishment, no fire. So, what if he is the heat? What if this was him turning it up? No one disagreed. Michael loved his grandfather. More than anyone, he had finally surrendered to the truth. The man had lived a double life. Michael wasn't playing a role. He was becoming. Keep the two lives separate but aligned. It made sense to him. What didn't? How no one saw men like Judge Westfield for what they were. Corrupt, complacent, untouchable. The system wasn't broken, it was built this way, and whenever someone tried to speak out, they were branded crazy, delusional, a nut. So maybe he shouldn't have taken the judge's side, but if he hadn't, the voice would have made him do worse. That much, he believed. Now he sat in the dealership's break room, plastic tables, microwave lunches, paper towels for napkins, a half circle of coworkers chattering about the killer like they were experts, the Zodiac, the podcast, the judge. Michael chewed slowly, waiting. Kill them all, he thought. He waited for the voice to say it, but it didn't, not even a whisper. That didn't set well with Michael. As the others talked over each other, Michael scrolled through an article he'd saved, something about behavioral traits, serial killer DNA. Another claimed handwriting could be genetically passed down. Michael looked down at his own notes, scratched on a napkin beside his lunch. He wondered if his grandfather's letters had looked like this before they were perfected, before they were feared. He made a mental note. Try it later. Muffler had to interject at every level of the conversation. He was nothing, if not loud and smug. I am telling you, he said, waving a burrito like a mic. What if the killer was in the crowd? That's why they were taking all those pictures, you know. Hell, I might have caught the guy on my phone. He looked right at Michael. You might have been standing next to the killer, Mikey boy. Oh, wait, that's right. You weren't there. Sarcasm, dripping like grease. Michael stared at him. Kill that muffler. The voice stayed silent. Instead, Michael smiled. Wouldn't surprise me, muffler. He moved forward. Nikki's been finding pine needles in my boxers. Pause. Thinks I'm sleepwalking. Silence. Then laughter from everyone but Muffler. Michael leaned back in his chair, steady, controlled, for now. Chapter 42. Bad joke or what? Michael realized the headaches were not as bad once he gave in to the realization he was the grandson of the original Zodiac. The blood in his veins, it belonged to the Zodiac. He believed now that his grandfather had continued to kill, that he must have lived a double life. He would have had to. Michael remembered him vividly. A leader, calm, intelligent, loving. How could someone like that be the same man now whispering in his DNA? Unless he'd found a way to feed the urge, the same way Michael was trying to. From the article he had read, he decided to try the writing experiment. He flipped the letter over and started copying random phrases from different Zodiac notes. The more he wrote, the more something clicked, like muscle memory, like his hand remembered a language his brain didn't. He tried signing it, Zodiac. Then, just for himself, Winsor. He held the two papers side by side, same strange capitals, same erratic spacing, same anger in the strokes. His throat felt dry. He hadn't tried to match the handwriting exactly, but it matched anyway. After staring at the paper for what felt too long, Michael decided he would move past the undecided stage. He had a plan: help Clara succeed, guide her podcast, shape her voice, punish the system, show them they were never safe. A few more criminals, a few final truths. Then the Zodiac would fade again, slip back into the shadows. Wait. He was in the kitchen making dinner when Nikki walked in, face tight. Michael, she said, there are 2 police officers in the living room. They want to talk to you. She hesitated. About the stabbing in the park. Michael's heart rocketed out of his chest and hit the ceiling fan. His writings were in the kitchen trash. He rinsed his hands, ran them through his hair. Deep breath. Then followed her into the living room. The officers were polite, smiling. They introduced themselves. Everyone sat. Small talk first. Then they said a coworker had mentioned that Michael might have helpful information. Michael raised an eyebrow. Coworker? One officer checked his notepad. Patrick Dennison. Muffler. Inside, Michael was molten lava. Outside, he smiled, apologized, said he didn't know anything beyond what he'd read in the papers and heard around work. Nikki looked surprised, maybe disappointed, like something small had shifted she couldn't quite name. She didn't say anything, just crossed her arms and looked at the floor. Michael felt it. A flicker. Then it was gone. Michael stayed calm, professional, just another guy caught in a misunderstanding. The next morning, Wrecker was outside prepping a couple of loners when Michael clocked in. Michael nodded a greeting but said nothing. He still wanted to explode, but he wouldn't give Muffler the satisfaction. Besides, Nikki thought this job represented their future, stability, growth, something solid. Michael wouldn't ruin that. Not over Muffler. The day moved quickly. He and Wrecker shuffled inventory, helped with service, and took a few test drives. By the time he looked at the clock, it was already lunch. He was finishing up when Muffler walked in with two friends, grinning. Do anything exciting last night, Michael? Michael looked up, calm, smooth. Nope. Just another peaceful night at the cottage. He smiled. You gentlemen have a good afternoon. Kill them with kindness, he thought. No. Kill them, the voice screamed. Chapter 43. Do better. Traffic in the city was bad on its best day. On its worst, well, that's why living and working downtown had its perks, not needing to own a car. That was a big one. Trina Presley didn't make as much money as she wanted, but she made ends meet, had a little extra at the end of the month, had her own place, didn't live with her parents like some of her friends. There was always something happening downtown, grand openings, art crawls, rooftop DJs. Tonight, it had been a fundraiser for the Children's Home of Greater San Francisco. They needed new beds. The state's budget has come up short again. Funny how there's always money for the projects they want to fund, someone muttered during the speeches. Others nodded. Quietly, Trina didn't disagree. She was a parole officer, had been for 11 years. She'd seen how budgets worked or didn't, how priorities shifted, how people got forgotten. Her caseload had been overwhelming. One of her final cases before reassignment, Marcy Ann Marie Johnson. There were regrets. They kept her up at night, especially since the judge had been stabbed. She hadn't planned to attend the event tonight, but it was close to home. For a good cause, open bar, free food. She'd volunteered to help set up and tear down tables, trying to earn back a little goodwill wherever she could. She'd heard what people were saying about her job performance. They weren't wrong. You wouldn't have to dig deep to find missteps in the Marcy Johnson case. Trina had received death threats. Twice, she found notes on her desk telling her to quit. She couldn't. 14 more years until retirement. No rich parents, no safety net. She had to keep going. Support from her boss turned non-existent. Her co-workers, distant at best. Her friends at work had drifted away. No one wanted to get caught in the splash zone. She was exhausted. Trina had gone in early to receive a delivery, stayed late to fold tables and stack chairs. Her body ached. Her mind buzzed with worry about her future, about those 14 long years ahead, about whether she'd even last that long. Maybe that's why her guard was down. Maybe that's why she didn't notice. The killer got close, too close, a single shot to the head. It was an instant. Later, the message appeared. This is the Zodiac. The system is broken. Do better, and I won't have to intervene again. I don't want to. It wasn't me. Not all me. Z. Chapter 44. Closer. Clara and Sean watched the footage on loop. Black sweatsuit, black sneakers, one shot to the back of her head. Trina Presley never had a chance. They widened the search radius, picked up the figure 2 blocks out, then 4, then again, blurry, riding a bike. After that, they could only watch the figure on what appeared to be a mountain-type bike. if they were guessing, disappear into a small patch of woods. It only took a few minutes for things to really start moving. It may have only been a sliver, but it felt like a lot to a group that had had so little. Kenny went to the large map on the wall. Two young men, accosted by a deranged man with a weapon just outside a bar, also within walking distance. The alley where the brothers were murdered, and the home where Marcy Johnson and her aunt were killed. It wasn't a road map, but it was a cluster, and clusters mattered, a starting point. Clara only sat with her arms in her lap. She was not convinced this meant anything. The killer could live anywhere, thinking her time would be well spent working on the podcast. But to Sean, this may be the killer's first mistake. Leonard offered to take the streets. He and Styx would canvass the district, get a feel for the place. Clara would stay back and work on the next podcast episode. Kenny and Sean planned to keep in close contact with the authorities, meeting with the FBI and CIA, then lunch with Leonard downtown. They would be canvassing the area, looking for any opportunity to get images of the suspect leaving the area. Leonard had learned long ago, sometimes catching someone wasn't about brilliance. Sometimes it was about being there when the mask slipped. Downtown San Francisco's bar district was something to behold. Leonard moved methodically, not sightseeing but absorbing. The area looked polished. But, like so many downtowns, night changes everything. The cracks begin to show. Meanwhile, it was Michael's lunch break. He needed a breather, from work, from Muffler, from everyone and everything. He had officially started buying cigarettes instead of constantly borrowing them. He was almost in the designated smoking area when he sensed someone was behind him. "Muffler, I think it was you at the park," he said. "What I don't know is why you're lying." Michael stood, mouth halfway open. "I'm not one to let things go," Muffler added. "Just saying, so, if you've got bloody clothes in your hamper, you might want to do something about that." Then he walked off, like he hadn't just flipped Michael's world upside down. Michael couldn't process. Muffler? Really? If he truly thought Michael had stabbed someone, why confront him like this? Unless he wanted something, or worse, he was trying to draw him out. Either way, he had to be dealt with. Michael knew it. The voice didn't even have to say it. Muffler wasn't going away, and that meant Michael was going to get caught, unless he eliminated the threat. The rest of the day, Muffler was everywhere, in his periphery, on the service floor, by the vending machine, orbiting Michael like a curse. It was driving him mad. And then, mercy. One of the managers asked Wrecker if he could spare Michael for the rest of the day. Another location across town needed help. Michael needed this, the space, an atmosphere that did not involve his new nemesis. But mostly, he needed to think. He texted Nikki on the drive, said he needed time to clear his head. Her reply came 3 minutes later. "Everything okay?" He stared at it a moment before typing back, "Just work stress." She didn't answer after that, and that fact concerned him. Podcast content must be agreed upon by both parties. That was what Sean and Clara had decided. "Sean, it's just a podcast. We're not the Chronicle. You said that yourself." Clara didn't flinch. "Exactly. Which means we don't have editors to catch us if we go too far. And I won't be responsible for someone getting hurt because we speculated too hard on a microphone." Her voice didn't rise, but the intensity in it landed hard. Sean held up a hand, surprised by the force of her reaction. "Okay, you're right." She softened a little, looked away. "We follow facts. That's all." But Sean couldn't help wondering. It had been a long day. Maybe she was right, but something told him someone in that downtown area would be able to help them catch a killer, even though their canvass of the area had not produced any leads. No one saw the bike or a man dressed in black exit the wooded area. Chapter 45. Muffled. The morning was still dark when Michael slipped out of bed. Nikki and Buddy were tangled in blankets, warm and unaware. His sneakers and sweater were already on the kitchen chair. Quiet preparation. He'd be back before they ever noticed. Hot shower, clean shave, to work a little early. It wasn't a day to be late. Today's route would be different. No phone, no watch, no electronics. He'd run farther than usual, just over 7 miles. That's what it would take. Muffler lived with his mother, talked about it all the time, bragged even. Michael listened, logged it. A passing comment about how close their houses were, meaningless then. Everything now. The plan had rules. His mother would not be harmed. That was decided early. No diversions, no chaos, just Muffler. His coworker stayed in a trailer behind the house. Temporary, he'd said, until his town home was finished. Whether that was true didn't matter. What mattered was he was an early riser, made breakfast for his mother every morning, always. Michael had heard that. He found it fascinating how much you could learn about a person if you take the time. As he jogged up to the edge of the property, he spotted the silhouette, Muffler, moving inside the main house. Good boy. Michael moved slowly. No cameras, no dogs, no other sounds. The trailer door was ajar, lights on, inside, quiet, clean, small, comfortable, no signs of a girlfriend. That helped. Michael stepped back out. Muffler was descending the front steps carrying a tray, looking down, focused on his footing. Michael waited, then stepped forward. Muffler, startled, nearly dropped the tray. Jesus, you scared me. Then, I was stopping by the police station on the way to work. His last words. The silencer gave Michael the head start he needed. He didn't kill him in the trailer. A calculated mercy. The mother could sell it more easily this way. Michael smirked, but only for a second. No time for foolishness. He needed a shave and a shower and a plan for Nikki. Because eventually, she would start asking the right questions, and that would be a problem. Chapter 46. Death of a Salesman. McKinley Chevrolet felt more like a funeral home than a dealership. Michael was acting the part of a bereaved coworker in shock. He'd taken a few pills an hour earlier, and they were doing their job. It had been announced the dealership would be closing early, but that authorities had requested everyone to stay until they arrived. Those words sent a chill through the building, but through one man, they sent a shockwave. Michael hadn't thought about that. He should have. Hadn't thought about his encounter with the detective. He should have. Sloppy. Now he was sure that guy would come to his work. Why wouldn't he? Had he gotten close enough to recognize him? The workday was short, but the day itself dragged. Small groups gathered, sharing stories about Muffler. Funny stories. Stories about his mom. Stories about his work ethic. Michael felt like he was being punished. He just wanted out of the building. So, when the first detective walked through the front doors, and it wasn't the one he was dreading, he made sure he was close, and it worked. Within a few minutes, they were sitting in a salesman's cubicle, having a nice chat about the dealership, its reputation, and how long Michael had worked there. Then, Muffler. Michael was very forthcoming about the encounter in the park. He knew it would come up, so he got out ahead of it, downplayed it, made it seem insignificant. When he was done, he felt he'd done a decent job. The detective was hard to read, professional, but just friendly enough. It would probably depend on how others described the same incident. Michael had taken a few items from the trailer to make it look like a robbery, then tossed them in the river. Gone. He saw no reason Muffler needed to be taken other than his mouth, so the Zodiac wouldn't be taking credit for this one. As Michael exited through the side entrance, he saw one of the senior salesmen speaking with a detective. That's Trammell, he thought. He just needed to slip out the door without being seen. Paranoia was setting in. He just wanted to get home, spend time with Nikki and Buddy, take his mind off things. As he pulled away from the dealership, he checked the rearview mirror. There, Detective Trammell stepping through the same side doors Michael had just come through minutes earlier. He looked around, caught sight of the car, and watched it leave the lot. Michael had the feeling he'd be getting a visitor soon. At the cottage, Michael busied himself with chores, did the dishes, folded a load of laundry, packed a cooler with drinks, sandwiches, and snacks. He gathered Buddy's essentials, texted Nikki. A little over an hour later, they were sitting on a bench at the park, watching their puppy play. They drank grape soda, ate peanut butter and fluff sandwiches, told each other about their day. Nikki asked what was expected, but Michael was surprised at the tone, especially when it came to his encounter with Muffler and the man's sudden death. She came close to crossing a line, realized it, pulled back. But it was too late. Michael felt it. The person he trusted most in the world didn't trust him the same way anymore. There was a shift in their universe, and both felt it. Sean and Clara arrived at McKinley Chevrolet a few minutes before Kenny and Leonard. Inside, the detective in charge asked Sean to begin interviewing employees. Clara knew the owners and managers, so she excused herself to speak with them directly. Soon after Kenny and Leonard arrived, they agreed to assist with interviews before heading back to the crime scene. Sean's first interview was with a senior salesman named Trevor Milton. Mr. Milton was midway through a story about tension between the victim and another employee. When that very employee walked past, Sean let Trevor finish, then stepped outside, hoping to catch up with the man. But the car was already pulling out of the lot. Michael Winsor, Sean made a note, top of the list. He returned to complete 6 more interviews. While waiting for one of the lot attendants, Sean asked an office staff member to retrieve him an employee's home address. The plan, Sean, Kenny, and Leonard would pay Michael Winsor a visit. Clara had a few errands. They'd all meet for dinner later. The cottage sat back off the road. It was nice. Farmy, as Leonard put it. Not a word, but maybe it should be. Barn, animals, no vehicles in sight. Still, they approached cautiously. After walking the perimeter, they felt comfortable. No one was there. Sean left his business card on a small glass table near the back door, where he placed a small rock on it to ensure it didn't blow away. A simple message written on the back. Please call. I'd like to speak with you. Chapter 47. They met. The business card might as well have been a beacon. A silent alarm. Nikki went into full panic mode. Michael couldn't calm her down. She was convinced the police believed he had something to do with Muffler's death. Convinced. While she took a long shower, trying to compose herself, Michael spiraled. He was a wreck. He had no plans to meet with the detective. None. But could he avoid it? What if they showed up at work? What were his rights? He'd already spoken to one detective. Maybe he should speak to a lawyer. But then again, wouldn't that make him look guilty? And the truth, he was. He needed to lower his stress level. So he went to the one place he thought might help without hurting anyone, the garage. He loaded the CD player with classic rock, cranked the volume, added more weight than usual to the bar, and launched into a punishing back and shoulder workout. 15 minutes in, he thought he heard a car door. It didn't even cross his mind that the detectives would come back the same day. It didn't cross Nikki's either. She stood frozen on the back steps, a look of pure terror on her face. Michael had nowhere to run. Not that he would have. The 3 detectives were already making their way toward the garage. He lowered the music, grabbed his towel, wiped his face, picked up his water bottle, and stepped into the yard to meet them. After the introductions, Michael apologized for not calling back. He said he'd assumed they were off duty for the night and that he planned to call in the morning. A lie, but they didn't need to know that. Nikki emerged with sweet tea and the best smile she could manage. The detectives told her she could stay if she liked, but she could read the look on Michael's face. Things had been rocky lately, but they were trying. Nikki wanted to stay, like her life, her future, depended on it. Still, she went inside, curled up on the couch, scrolling through old photos of the 2 of them in high school, wishing for better days. Kenny had picked up on the moment. He'd read up on Michael before they left, and before the night was over, he planned to speak to Nikki. Michael didn't seem to know he had every right to end the conversation at any time. He gave the impression he was obligated to talk, and the detectives were fine letting him believe that. As the conversation began to wind down, Kenny offered to take the glasses inside. Leonard and Sean picked up on the gesture. They steered the conversation toward Michael's Monte Carlo. Something light, relatable. Michael eased, let his guard down. Inside, Kenny found Nikki at the kitchen table, crying softly. He placed the glassware in the sink and asked if he could sit. She nodded. He knew Leonard and Sean would keep Michael occupied long enough for him to get what he needed, but he still moved quickly. A few minutes later, Kenny returned outside. To his surprise, Leonard and Sean were in the garage with Michael, flipping through his music collection. Leonard called out, laughing, "This guy has every Bad Company album on 8-track, and they're all pink." Kenny chuckled. They definitely made Michael feel at ease. They shook hands, thanked him for his time, and walked away, Michael none the wiser. Chapter 48. The Puzzle. Sean liked the hunt, the puzzle. The pieces had to fit naturally, no forcing. This Michael Winsor character, he could have been the jogger, similar build, hair matched, but it was from a distance, a solid maybe at best. Then there was the girlfriend, Nikki. Kenny had only a couple of minutes with her, but they were valuable. Mood swings, anger, long absences, money that supposedly came from odd jobs with friends at odd hours. Friends she had never met. She clearly loved him, and she was worried. When Kenny suggested she stay with her parents until the case broke, she panicked. He hadn't pushed, but now the trio, Sean, Kenny, Leonard, were worried, not just for the case, for Nikki's safety. Michael felt his world collapsing. Nikki had been distant ever since the detectives came. Had Kenny, the slick one, said something to her in the kitchen? Michael couldn't remember how long he'd been gone. She hadn't said anything. When he pushed, she cried. Did she think he was the killer? Maybe, and the thought shattered him. He didn't know why he was still going to work. The authorities were closing in. They'd probably spoken to Clara. They shared so much. His thoughts scattered, shattered. 8 summers earlier, it was supposed to be just another Tuesday, a carefree day in the life of a boy, worried only about what his mom was cooking for dinner and how long could he talk to his girlfriend on the phone. But at 3:42 p.m., a drunk driver ran a stop sign and slammed into school bus number 224. One child died. Seat number 171, Melody Blankenship. Her parents, Steve and Ruby, her brother Max, her boyfriend sitting beside her that day, Michael Winsor. The paramedics said she died instantly, felt no pain. Michael never believed them. Not then, not now. The driver survived, drove 2.2 miles home, parked in her driveway, was eating cereal on the couch when the police arrived. The case became a firestorm. The driver's husband left. Her kids disappeared. She got life. Clara had covered the story, from the crash to the courtroom to settlements and follow-ups. And along the way, she found an angle, the grieving teenage boyfriend, a young man who just needed someone to talk to. Michael, he talked. Clara listened and wrote. When he went quiet, she talked to make him comfortable. She gave him her contact info, so he could reach out. But Michael misunderstood. He thought Clara had feelings for him, romantic feelings. He began to follow her, call and hang up, show up places she didn't expect. It could have ended badly, but Clara wasn't that kind of person. She knew she had, in some way, used Michael, so she did something rare. Clara went to his house, sat with his parents, apologized to them and to Michael. They worked it out. Over time, they kept in touch. Big life events, small victories, and that changed something. He began to love her in a different way, a maternal way. She had been kind to him when he was shattered. She had listened, understood, accepted him, even when he was broken. He'd followed her career ever since, and now he was part of her story again. Only this time, he was writing the ending. Chapter 49. No grand finale. With every announcement over the loudspeaker, every time someone walked through the door, Michael felt a ping in his chest. Why didn't he run? And once he got there, why didn't he leave? He didn't know. Maybe because there was nowhere to go. There would be no grand finale. Not for him, not the kind with headlines, with mythology, with fear disguised as fame. Only silence and failure. It was clear now. He wasn't going to live the life he'd once imagined his grandfather had lived. A shadow life, killing just enough to feed the craving, still holding down a job, smiling for photos, coming home to someone who loved him. That was the dream. He wanted that life for Nikki, for himself. But now all he could think about was how it would end. Would he see her again, kiss her one more time? Or had they already said goodbye, with suspicion hanging in the air like smoke? Would he see his parents? Would he be taken alive? Or would he fight? He hadn't decided. Wrecker could tell something was off. He chalked it up to stress, the grief of losing Muffler, and let it slide. The day dragged. The weekend is coming. They were both off for the next 2 days. Right before clocking out, Wrecker got a call from the sales manager. When he hung up, he tossed Michael a key fob from the rack. Can you put this one back out front? Sale fell through. Boss wants it on the front line for the weekend. Thanks. Tracy made us reservations at Tony's. And just like that, Michael was left alone. He exited through the side door, half expecting flashing lights, badges, voices shouting his name. Why wouldn't they be waiting? He stood in the stillness of the service lot, just him and half a dozen vehicles. He pressed the key. The horn chirped on a black C8 Corvette. Michael smiled. Then the voice whispered, "Why not just take it?" A farewell tour. He parked it out front. Perfect angle, perfect shine. Paused. If he wanted, it would be easy. So easy. The voice whispered. He had the key. License plate. 2 on his desk, easily slipped in his backpack. Come back after dark. Put on the plate. Start her up. Gone. He even had a gas card in his locker. An hour later, Michael sat at the same kitchen table where Kenny had spoken with Nikki. Now he stared at a note, her handwriting, wide loops, small, careful strokes, the answer to one of his many questions. He would never see Nikki or Buddy again. She had left, gone to her parents. She was afraid of him. Michael felt something split inside, not a crack, a tear. He was devastated. But the break wasn't just sadness. It was something more. He hadn't killed since Muffler. Not long in real time, but to him, it felt like a lifetime. It was time to hunt. There were no names, no direction, not yet. Life had gotten in the way of death, but that had changed. Now, with Nikki gone, the final thread had been cut. His strength gone, his reason gone. The truth had settled in. The girl who had once loved him had been living with a killer. The words in her letter cut holes in his chest. She hadn't been wrong. Michael could have been like his grandfather. He knew that, deep in his core. But now he knew something else, too. He had lost Nikki, forever. And without her, the voice had all the room it needed. Chapter 50. Run. When Sean told her about the only name on their suspect list was Michael Winsor, she dropped to the sofa. Then, she told the story, her story, to Sean, Kenny, and Leonard. How she'd met Michael, how he misunderstood her kindness, how it could have ended badly, but didn't. Kenny added that Michael's girlfriend had taken his advice and moved back in with her parents. That gave them some comfort. For now. Michael's supervisor confirmed he had worked a full shift the day Muffler died. Nothing unusual, no red flags. Still, the team had contacted the local FBI office. Agent Haywood Hardy agreed that Michael Winsor needed to be put under immediate surveillance. Sean had been digging into Michael's family. His father, still alive, an accountant, never even had a speeding ticket. His grandfather, a military man, no record, no suspicion in the original Zodiac investigation. A family name one could be proud of. So, Sean wondered, were they wrong? Was Michael just a strange guy? Because strange didn't mean killer, but Kenny couldn't shake it. They'd mapped the route. Neighbors confirmed he was a runner. The timeline worked. It was plausible. He could have killed Muffler. He could have dumped the items. He could have cleaned up and gone to work like nothing had happened, which meant he could be the Zodiac. And if he was, then one of his relatives, maybe his grandfather, had been the original. Within an hour, a search party was assembled, and the route most likely taken by the killer would be methodically walked. Clara offered to lead the search. Michael came back from a 4-mile run, convinced every passing car was a trap. He wasn't going to fight. He'd made that decision. If they came for him, he'd go peacefully. He wasn't going to taint his family name any further. He wasn't going to let Nikki see him get tackled on live TV. The humiliation would be unbearable. He left the doors unlocked. Took a long shower. Still, no knock, no sirens, no shouting. After dressing in cargo pants and his favorite t-shirt, Michael sank into the beanbag. He missed Nikki so much, it physically hurt. Thoughts of his ex, girlfriend, and their dog seemed to float freely. He had hoped reflection would calm his spirit. Instead, it enraged every fiber of his being. His phone rang, a number he knows, a voice as well. Run, Michael, without thinking, bolted upright, disoriented, panicked. He grabbed his keys, headed for the door, then doubled back. Cash. He needed cash. In the garage, he grabbed both duffel bags, tossed them in the passenger seat, and left the little cottage for the last time. The sun was setting. Dusk. Not quite dark. He parked the Monte Carlo on the side of the building. There a small park and some basketball courts sitting on the other side of the road. Unfortunately, the area had been declared an unofficial danger zone, unless you were a gangbanger, so parents did not allow their children anywhere close, and the gangs had been raided so many times they stayed clear, so a nice park had no visitors. From this vantage point, Michael could watch the last manger leave in his $80,000 Tahoe. He waited another 15 minutes for good measure, then the license plate from his backpack, a casual walk over to the black Corvette. A few minutes later, he was on the 101, heading south. In San Lucas, he filled up with premium fuel. Michael then followed the 12 steps he'd found online to disable the OnStar tracking system. What couldn't you find on the internet? In Barstow, he picked up 40, then 15 north, Las Vegas. He'd never been. He and Nikki had always talked about going. Michael used to joke they'd get married by Elvis. When Michael didn't return home and the Monte Carlo wasn't found, an APB went out. His name, photo, vehicle, Sean blamed himself. A neighbor said they missed Michael by 5 minutes. After the APB, it didn't take long to find the Monte Carlo at the dealership. It didn't take long to confirm the Corvette was missing, but it nearly took an act of Congress to find out its tracker had been disabled. The FBI again released his name, photo, and new vehicle description, as well as the stolen plate number they believed he was using. Michael heard it first on XM radio, then again and again. He changed license plates whenever he could, rest stops mostly. He aborted a few swaps, too many eyes, but he did his best. He pulled out the fourth disposable cell and dialed. She picked up immediately. "Hi, Michael." "Hi, Clara." They could use names now. No more hiding. He welcomed Sean, Kenny, and Leonard to the call. Asked if anyone else was listening. No one was. He believed them. Then, after a long break, he made his request. They were quiet, surprised, but they understood. If they wanted to get anything more out of the Zodiac, it would have to be done live. Chapter 51. Vegas. The authorities were notified immediately. One overeager rookie floated the idea of tricking Michael, making the live podcast seem live when it wasn't. Kenny shut it down before she finished her sentence. "He'll know," he said flatly. "He's not stupid, and this can't go sideways." Michael sat in a massive parking lot just off the Las Vegas Strip. Backed in, facing a giant water fountain that lit up with music and color every few minutes. A tourist magnet. It would be his view for the night. He had snacks, bottled water, a couple of sweet teas, smokes. He sat on the curb and lit one. The Corvette, he'd decided, was too nice to reek of cigarettes. Clara had promised to call back in a few minutes. He hadn't planned what to say. They'd ask questions. He'd answer, or he wouldn't. Simple. Las Vegas was the kind of place you could disappear in, blend into the noise, be a podcast feature 1 minute, slip into a crowd of Elvis impersonators next. How long could the Zodiac stay the Zodiac in Sin City? The call came in at 7:03 p.m. It ended just after 9. They asked about his plans. He told them the truth. He didn't have one. The voice had gone quiet. No orders, no clarity, no whispers, but the need, the hunger, that remained, and he didn't lie about that. He apologized to Nikki. Most would agree he did the best he could under the circumstances. The same would not be said when it came to Michael's parents. While he tried to say good things, tried to ease their pain, in the end, it was just a few minutes of why his parents never should have had a child. One last time, he explains who his grandfather really was, a great man despite his sins. No one would believe him, but he had to say it, had to try. He talked about blood, how it had moved from his veins into his brain. He wasn't making excuses, just offering something useful. Data, psychology, pattern. Maybe it would help someone down the road. Someone else born with the rage. Michael had the sense that Sean believed him, at least a little. He explained the voice, the fury, the pressure. He hadn't asked for any of it, but it was his burden, his inheritance. As the call wound down, so did he. There was nothing more to say. He lit another cigarette, inhaled. There was quiet on the other end, no grand finale, just a pause. Then, "God only knows what the next chapter of this story will be," Michael said. "Thanks for the opportunity." Like, it was an interview, or a job he almost got right. He offered to be studied, after it was over, and then the line went dead. The burner couldn't be traced. GPS disabled. He had vanished. Not the FBI, not the task force, not Michael had any idea where he was headed. His photo and the stolen Corvette were everywhere. News networks, social media, police scanners. He was now officially armed and dangerous. His parents had no clue where he might go. Nikki didn't either. He had distant relatives in Seattle and eastern North Carolina, but no one thought he'd reach out. He had no one now. The question loomed, would he make a run for the border? Mexico? Canada? Both were being watched. Sean wasn't convinced he'd leave the country. Clara feared something else entirely. Something bigger, something final. High-ranking officials had made it very clear what their expectations were, and their disappointment with literally everything. The task force was on edge. Some would argue leaning over the edge with only one foot holding them up. 24 hours after the podcast, Michael was suffering. The headache had returned, brutal, unrelenting, worse than anything he'd felt in weeks. He was doing everything he could to avoid the stronger pills. He wanted to stay sharp because he knew what was coming. He would need to kill soon, not for justice, not for legacy, just to feel alive a little longer. Chapter 52. Diamond. The experience couldn't be explained. It had to be lived. Michael never would have believed it. This city, this noise, this swirl of humanity, if it weren't his own feet on the pavement, his own eyes taking it in. It was sensory overload. The streets were packed. He wandered, watched, drifted, finding people who were bad for society. Keepers of Sin City's worst reputation wouldn't be hard. Separating them from the crowd, that might be. He nursed a drink and played a slot machine for the first time ever. Then moved to another bar. A cover band played Fleetwood Mac so well he nearly forgot why he was there. Almost. The third establishment was the winner. Michael walked through the door and was approached immediately by a man selling drugs. 10 minutes later, a young woman slid onto the stool beside him. She called herself Diamond. To Michael, she looked more like a Stacy from Iowa, someone who had just stepped off a train, running from something, someone lost. He bought her a drink, but made it clear that was all. She was new. It showed. She didn't belong here. Then a tall, older woman came by, a whisper in Diamond's ear. She was gone. Drink left half full, following the woman toward the restrooms. Michael stayed, finished his drink, dropped a token in the nearest machine, pulled the lever, won $10 in chips. Maybe it's your lucky day, the voice said, which means it's someone else's unlucky one. Outside, Michael lit a cigarette like he just needed some fresh air. Security cameras were everywhere. He made sure to look casual, avoid looking directly at a camera. He found Diamond again 2 blocks away, moving with that trained rhythm. Available but guarded. It was probably why she was in trouble, not making the bosses enough money. Michael approached slowly, spoke softly, handed her a few bills, just enough for eyes to see. Then he walked her toward the motel behind the casino. Around the corner, he stopped, faced her. "If I can help you get home," he asked, "will you go?" He didn't say anything else, didn't push, just waited. "We have work to do," the voice snapped. "What are you doing?" Michael stayed focused. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. The tall woman again, with a couple of her goons. They'd come to check on their property. Michael acted fast. The only thing that made sense. He kissed Diamond, long and slow. The kind of kiss that made a statement. When he pulled back, he noticed the trio, acted like it was the first time. Took Diamond's hand and walked toward them, casual, confident, maybe the country's most wanted man, saving a girl from her worst mistake. Why not? He smiled. "Glad you're here," he said smoothly. "I'd like to spend the night with this lovely lady, if she'll have me." "How much would that cost me?" Silence. He didn't repeat the question, didn't blink, just waited. Eventually, the tall woman spoke. $3,500. Michael didn't flinch. He paid the money, turned to leave, then paused, glanced back. "You all have a good night." Chapter 53. Room 171. Michael was taking a huge risk. If Diamond, Taylor, lost her nerve or turned on him, it could all be over, but he didn't think she would. They'd moved the car to a safer lot. Now Michael lay flat in the bed of a lifted truck, nestled beneath a blanket and shadow, waiting for the men he knew would come. When he'd paid for Diamond, it had been clear to anyone watching. He had money, was alone. He was an easy target. And the woman in charge? She'd seen it all. Michael was counting on her greed. Taylor had promised to go home, back to her mother and sisters. She'd finish high school if he'd just put her on a bus. The station was nearby. The car was parked in an overflow lot just a block away. He'd paid for it, cash. Safe enough for her to rest until departure. She had an envelope, cash for the ticket, food for the ride. If he didn't return, she still had a way out. He was beginning to doubt his instincts when he felt it. A footstep. Close. Then more. Measured. Steady. 4 men. They moved like starving predators, inching toward room 171, as if pulled by instinct. 4. 3 more than he'd hoped, but fewer than she could have sent. That mattered. The parking lot was dim. Shadows stretched like claws across the pavement, reaching for the door to room 171 as if hungry for his soul. Michael remained still. Breathing slowed. He knew the order mattered. Every movement, every shot. 10, 2, 6, 8. If the parking lot were a clock face, those were their positions. When they hit their marks, Michael fired. 4 shots, 4 hard falls. He rolled out of the truck and scanned the silence. Nothing stirred. He checked his watch. 4 minutes until the bus left. He only needed 2. Hood up. Head down. He crossed the street. 3 women stood outside a different motel, chatting softly, unaware. He didn't stop, didn't hesitate. Michael stepped between them and fired. The tall woman, the one who sent the men, took the bullet to the face at point-blank range. Then Michael ran up the alley, listening for pursuit. There was none. He almost wished there was. Taylor stood in line at the bus station, clutching her envelope. She looked up just as Michael rounded the corner. He stopped, met her gaze, gave a thumbs up. She nodded. A teenage girl, maybe 15, free. Michael stood by the hood of the Corvette and smoked 2 cigarettes. The sirens were already echoing in the distance. He knew he should go, but he waited, just long enough to watch the bus pull out of the station, just long enough to believe she had a chance. He followed, eased onto the road, just behind the taillights. Once they hit the interstate, he settled into the middle lane at 68 miles per hour. Let the hum of the highway soften the chaos that surrounded him. A wave of missing Nikki washed over him, so strong it made his hands tremble, the urge to call her. Just hear her voice one more time. The car jerked slightly. Panicked, Michael looked around. No cops, not yet. 20 minutes later, he pulled into a rest area and tucked the Corvette between an RV and a Lowe's truck. Not ideal. He had no choice. Chapter 54. Sunday. Perfect weather. Allegiant Stadium loomed over the Las Vegas skyline, hulking, otherworldly, like a spaceship grounded in desert light. To Michael, it was sacred ground, a family shrine, 3 generations of Windsor men, each loyal to the Raiders, his grandfather, his father, Michael. They'd never been the shoulder pad and war paint type, but they sat with the ones who were. Raider Nation, loud, loyal, obsessed. Michael knew he was a wanted man. His face was on TV, his name trending, but he also knew he wouldn't run forever. The voice was gone again. The rage had cooled. He just wanted to see his Raiders one last time. It wasn't about the game, not really. It was about going back to laughter, to legacy, to the only place that ever felt like home. When the gates opened, he tapped the app on his phone and held his breath, silently pleading for the digital ticket to scan. It did. He weaved through the crowd, past the chants and the merch stands, until he found a quiet patch of shade beneath a large tree. For a fleeting, precious moment, Michael felt at peace. Then, almost instinctively, he pulled out his phone and dialed the number. "This is the Zodiac." This time, Sean answered. "Hello?" "Just the person I was hoping to speak with," Michael said. "Hello, Michael. How can I help you end this?" "I'm done, Sean." The voice is gone. "I'm not going to hurt anyone else. I like Clara and I think you do too. Be good to her, please. She's a nice lady." A pause. "I'll be easy to find. I haven't gone far. I'll be surrounded by thousands like me, people who love what I love. Just let me forget the outside world for a little while and then I'll walk out to you." The room was silent. The line was still open, but Michael clearly was done talking to them. It was only a matter of seconds, time that mattered. Finally, Sean spoke to the room. So, do we believe him? Clara answered first. Yes. Sean nodded. He leaned that way too. There was something different about Michael this time. Someone asked, "Any idea where this guy could be?" He said he'd be surrounded by thousands like him today, who love like him, Sean echoed. We need a list. Concerts, festivals, sporting events. A young analyst in the back called out. A couple of NFL games just kicked off. Background noise on the call might have been crowd noise. Sean's team jumped on it. Within minutes, they confirmed. Background audio matched a live feed from the Raiders' home game. They checked the Windsor name, season tickets, section C133, row 12, seats 1 to 6. The FBI secured seats in row 27 of the same section. Sean's team somehow landed row 13, seats 1 and 2. Neither Sean nor Kenny asked how. They just thanked the staff and made a mental note to buy them something nice. Then they boarded the helicopter, hoping to make the second quarter. Michael was nervous as he approached the section. These were his people. He'd seen their faces for years. They had watched him grow up. He had to hope nostalgia would shield him. Black and silver face paint, Raiders jerseys, hot dogs, beer, cheers. Michael became Phil from Reno, a used car salesman who scored a ticket from a resale site, section C133, row 12, seat 3, the Windsor seats, a family heirloom. The game kicked off. Broncos 14, Raiders 6 by the end of the first quarter. But Michael was smiling, laughing, talking football with strangers who felt like old friends. His cover seemed to be working. They had briefly asked where he got the ticket and did he know whose seats they were. Michael acted surprised and curious, enough, but not too much. Then, at the start of the second quarter, two familiar figures slid into the seats beside him. Sean, Kenny, hot dogs, beer, casual smiles, like they were really going to let him enjoy the game. The Raiders received the kickoff, drove down the field, first down, a penalty, a deep pass to the 3-yard line. Next play, touchdown. The stadium erupted. High fives, chants, unity. Michael was happier than he had been in a long time, thinking of his dad and grandfather several times, remembering. They scored when you guys showed up, he said. Maybe you're good luck. Sean smiled. Maybe. None of them knew if Michael was armed. Security should have prevented it, but they could not take the chance. They believed him. When the game ended, he would walk out with them, into custody, into history. Best laid plans. Midway through the third quarter, Stuart Bigley was drunk, loud, obnoxious, and for some reason, fixated on Phil from Reno. Phil, what's your favorite meal at Bully's Tavern? Michael shrugged. Never been. Never been? What about Death by Nails? You had to go there. Michael was annoyed. Yeah, whatever. Stu kept pressing. The doorman at Death by Nails. What color's his hair? Michael tried to brush him off. Sean, Kenny could feel the pressure the young man was experiencing. Just say bald, they both thought. He is bald, Michael muttered. Wrong answer. Stu stood. He has the reddest, longest hair you've ever seen. You ain't from Reno. Michael said nothing. Let me guess. Favorite restaurant? High school? Where's the post office? Michael stayed quiet. Stu swayed. Deep thought had taken him over. He was a smart guy when sober, and his friends would say even smarter when he was drunk. Then came the moment, the pointing finger. That's him. That's the Zodiac guy's grandson. He killed all those people. The mob hesitated, as if absorbing the words, then swallowed Michael whole. A tidal wave of fists, screams, drunken rage. Kenny reached for him, grabbed the back of Michael's jacket, and tried to pull him out of the storm. Two fans seized Michael's arms. Kenny lost his grip. The jacket tore away. The beating really began. Punches, boots, shouts. Michael dropped, curled up, tried to protect himself. But the blows kept coming. He felt ribs crack. Blood flooded his mouth. Something rips behind his eye. Sean and Leonard fought through the chaos. Security followed, pushing the trio forward. As the scene unfolded, the game was halted just long enough to ensure the safety of the public, players, and supporting staff. To the nation, it looked like another brawl in the stands. But it wasn't. It was Michael Winsor, supporting his beloved Raiders one last time. The killer was not taken down by SWAT, not by courtroom justice. but by strangers, by fury, by hands that didn't know his story, only his crimes. Justice. Maybe, but it came with fists, not a verdict. Chapter 55, Savannah. By the time the mob tired of beating Michael, the body of the Zodiac lay broken, bruised, and twisted between the aisles. Face paint smeared with sweat and tears, blood pooling. The medical examiner would later conclude that Michael had been alive through most of the assault. A final blow to the head was likely the cause of death. Each man saw something different in the end. Leonard believed it was justice. Kenny felt the weight of social collapse. Is this what the world has come to? Sean, though, saw the loss as a tragedy, a missed opportunity to study a killer raised in the shadow of the original Zodiac, a case that could have reshaped how they understood inherited trauma. But he kept those thoughts to himself for the moment. Most people wouldn't understand. There were no final notes, no manifesto, no lingering riddles, no murder weapon, no trace of the stolen money. Just a man erased by mob justice. The Corvette was recovered without a scratch, nearly spotless inside. The owner was relieved, though irritated by the added mileage. Clara was waiting at the station when the team returned. Everyone noticed how she ran straight into Sean's arms. So did Sean. Styx nearly took Leonard to the ground. He was so excited. The next 4 days were a blur. Interviews, paperwork, legal meetings, authorities and lawyers dotted every I and crossed every T, making sure there'd be no legal fallout from the public takedown of one of the most wanted men in America. On the 5th day, they accompanied Kenny to the airport. The group ordered drinks, but by fate or chance, Kenny had not received his. While waiting at the bar, Kenny struck up a conversation with a woman headed to North Carolina as well. By the time his boarding group was called, Kenny had forgotten all about his fear of flying. 2 days later, Clara and Sean said their goodbyes to Leonard and Styx, who began the long road trip back to the East Coast. Clara packed trail mix for the trip, a thoughtful touch Leonard appreciated. Sean and Clara boarded a flight to Georgia. Savannah, later that same morning. There, they'd record the final episodes of Zodiac, Attempted Redemption, and quietly explore what came next for them. They had the talk, agreed they were open to the idea of a relationship, an exclusive one. Their first full day was spent sightseeing. Clara had fond memories of the city. For Sean, it was the first. Spanish moss, cobblestone streets, quiet charm, a welcome reprieve. On day 2, they recorded the next to last episode. No missed recordings, no forgotten lines, just 2 people finding their rhythm. On the 3rd day, it rained. They stayed in, recorded the final episode. Michael's story had always been about duality, legacy and loss, redemption and destruction, and now closure. They discussed his final acts, the attempt to save a life, to do something right, even if it came too late. His end had been brutal. Clara found it difficult to speak at times, but she got through it. Sean was proud of her. Afterward, they stepped out into the post-storm mist and walked together through a quiet park. Pizza from a local pizzeria. A good day. They didn't talk about what came next, returning to their old lives, their routines, but that conversation would come. Sean gently squeezed Clara's hand as they took in the evening's beauty. Sean was sitting at the breakfast nook when Clara emerged from the bedroom. She went straight for the coffee, then sat across from him. "You got up early," she said. "I couldn't sleep," Sean replied. His eyes were locked on the small recorder in his hand. Something started to pull at me, that little voice telling me to listen to Michael's last tape again. Clara half laughed. Not a voice, Sean, but he didn't laugh. She noticed. "Is something wrong?" He hit play. "I was going to surrender." She called, said run. So I ran. Michael's voice, a whisper that could have been lost. "This was at the end of the live episode," Sean said, his voice low. "I thought I heard him say something before he hung up, but I couldn't make it out, so I had my team isolate it. Clean it up." Clara was still. "Sean," she began, but he cut in gently. Her tone shifted defensive. "Sean." "Clara," he said, firm but quiet. "Tell me I'm wrong." She stood. "I'm going to take a shower." 2 hours later, there was a knock at the door. Sean answered. Clara's attorney, Trinity Kimball, stepped inside. They exchanged stiff pleasantries. Trinity had become a familiar face over the past few days. "I was instructed to go into the bedroom with Clara when I arrived," she said. Sean nodded. Nearly 30 minutes passed. Then Clara and Trinity exited the room and walked directly out the front door, into the waiting arms of local authorities and the FBI. He sat on the back porch, eyes closed. Chapter 56. Zodiac, Attempted Redemption, Final Episode. Signed, Sean Trammell. Transcript, recorded live in Savannah, Georgia. Soft instrumental music fades out. Sean, this is the Zodiac, Attempted Redemption podcast. I'm Detective Sean Trammell. Tonight's not about evidence. It's not about theories, timelines, or motives. It's about frustration, about what we lost. We lost a suspect. We lost a witness. We lost a case that could have changed the way we understand criminal legacy. Michael Winsor wasn't just a killer. He was born in the shadow of one, raised in a family with secrets. The Zodiac wasn't just history to him. It was inheritance. We will never fully understand the psychological fracture that created him. Not because we lacked the tools, but because he died before we could ask the right questions, because justice came with fists, with boots, with a crowd that wanted blood more than answers. And I got it. I do. I've lost people. I've stared into the eyes of monsters. And there's a part of me that thinks maybe Michael got what he deserved, but there's another part that wonders what we could have learned if we'd had just a little more time. What if we could have mapped the exact moment when obsession turns to ideology, when legacy mutates into identity? When does someone stop seeing people and start seeing targets? We don't get to know now. And yes, unfortunately, there will be more monsters, each one unique in their own way. Michael Winsor is dead. So are his secrets. So are his answers. But I'm still here, and so are you, which means something. It means this story matters, and maybe that's the best we can hope for, that stories like this one don't just fade into infamy, that they teach, that they warn. I'm Detective Sean Trammell. Thank you for walking through this darkness. Good night. Music fades back in. Episode ends. The story was over, at least the part the world would see. After the podcast, Sean couldn't help but play the clip one last time. Unpublished audio clip. St. Cloud archive folder. Untitled file. Click. Clara's voice. I knew. Pause. Not everything. Not at first. Pause. But enough to speak up. I chose not to stop it. Deep breath. He was a story I couldn't walk away from. A broken boy fighting something we can never understand. I wanted to believe there was still something good in him. Maybe because I needed it to be true. For me. If lives were going to be lost anyway, I thought I could frame the narrative, some kind of faint background noise. I thought I could guide the storm. Long pause. I couldn't. Click. Sean visits Faith's portrait studio the day before he left CA. The bell above the door chimed softly. Faith looked up from behind the counter, a roll of black and white proofs spread in front of her. Her hair was tied back. A camera still hung from her neck. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said. Sean stepped inside, holding a small bouquet. Sunflowers, wild ones. Not dramatic, just sincere. "I'm heading out of town tomorrow," he said. "Wanted to say thank you, and I'm sorry." She waited. "Far enough," he added. "You were a lot of help. I was a jerk." Faith took the flowers, her eyes studying him for a long moment. "You did good work." "Took a village," Sean said. "Each one leaves you a little less." She gave a small nod. "You didn't have to come here." "I know," he said. Faith stepped out from behind the counter. "Want a portrait?" she asked, teasing. "Only if you can edit 10 years off my face," she smiled. "You'd be surprised what I can do." Then she turned and called through the curtain behind her stool. "Beth, are you good? A friend just surprised me with a lunch invite." Chapter 57. The Aftermath. Nikki had to drop out of college. She found out she was pregnant not long before leaving the cottage. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, not telling Michael, not being with him. Maybe if he had known, he would have changed, turned himself in, something. About a week after Michael's death, a letter came for Nikki. Inside, a handwritten note from Michael, a note she would share with no one. He expressed his love, spoke briefly about the future they could never have together. Michael ended the message with a surprise for Nikki. He told her to go to the place they first met, walk straight to the wood's edge, and there she would find 2 duffels, to do with as she please. The last time we saw Nikki, she had just closed on a beautiful home just outside of town. She was not working anymore. Nikki had become a full-time mother to her 28-month-old daughter, Chloe. Mr. and Mrs. Winsor left their home in the middle of the night, relocating to a remote stretch of the Appalachian Mountains. No interviews, no statements, no apology to the families, just silence, as if silence could somehow rewrite history. Clara, through her attorney, maintained her innocence for 7 days. On the 8th, Trinity Kimball stepped to the podium. They would be making a deal. Clara St. Cloud would serve her sentence at the California Institution for Women, Chino, San Bernardino County. We did what was necessary to bring resolution. The families deserve peace. Trinity Kimball, it wasn't a win, not for Sean. It was just another blow in a long string. The box, found on the floorboard of the C8 beneath an old sweatshirt. Its new home, Shelf 3726D, Evidence Room, SFPD. A quiet ending to a loud legacy, a relic quietly waiting. Kenny and Leonard surprised Sean with a deep-sea fishing trip, a full week in the Florida Keys, oceanfront rooms, no talk of cases, no autopsy reports, just sun, salt, and the sound of the waves. A different kind of healing. The trip was working. Sean was relaxed. He hadn't seen a fish, let alone catch one, but he met a guy with the best cigars in the Keys. Heaven. Leonard joined him on a bench, wiped the sweat from his brow, and said, "Sean, I've been thinking. You should write a book about our exploits. Can't be that hard, right?" Zodiac. Attempted redemption. He wanted to be good. The Zodiac wouldn't let him. Thank you for taking this journey with me. It means so much. If you know someone that you think would like the story but doesn't do podcasts or audiobooks, hard copies are available at Amazon. Lastly, to sample other stories, check out the podcast My Words, Our Journey, or Amazon. My suggestion would be maybe my favorite after Zodiac. It is entitled, Be Careful What You Wish For. Until our next journey.